What if Deku bonded with Venom? Seriously, just think about that for a second. You've got this kid who spent his entire life being told he's worthless because he doesn't have a quirk, and then bam, he gets an alien symbiote that's basically a living weapon with an attitude problem. This isn't just, oh cool, more powers. This is psychological warfare between a pure-hearted hero wannabe and a creature that thinks the best way to stop crime is to eat criminals. Venom can copy quirks, regenerate from basically anything, and oh yeah, now they have to share headspace with One for All too. The power combinations are absolutely ridiculous. But here's what makes this story brilliant: it's not about the powers. It's about Deku learning that being a hero sometimes means making deals with your inner demons. Literally, in this case. Like this if you're ready for some symbiotic chaos, and let's jump right in. Izuku Midoriya pressed his face against the bus window, breath fogging up the glass as he watched the Hero Research Institute grow larger on the horizon. The building looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, all gleaming metal and impossible angles, with the Hero Commission's logo emblazoned across its face in bold letters. "Stop acting like such a damn nerd, Deku." The familiar sneer made Izuku's shoulders tense. He didn't need to turn around to know Bakugo was glaring at the back of his head from 3 seats behind. Some things never changed, even on what was supposed to be an educational field trip. "I'm just excited," Izuku mumbled, finally pulling away from the window. "We never get to see actual hero research facilities. Did you know they study quirk evolution here, and they have samples from Nobody Cares?" Bakugo's voice cut through his rambling like a knife. "Just because they're letting quirkless losers on the field trip doesn't mean you belong here." The bus went quiet. That uncomfortable silence that always followed whenever someone mentioned Izuku's situation. At 15, he was one of maybe 3 kids in their entire school who still hadn't manifested a quirk. The other 2 at least had the excuse of being late bloomers. Izuku just had bad luck. Their homeroom teacher, Mr. Yamamoto, cleared his throat from the front of the bus. "All right, everyone, we're here. Remember the rules, stay with the group, don't touch anything, and please try to represent Aldera Junior High with some dignity." His eyes lingered on Bakugo when he said that last part. The Hero Research Institute was even more impressive up close. Izuku practically bounced on his feet as they walked through the lobby, past displays showing the evolution of support gear and holographic presentations about quirk theory. Everything here was cutting edge, the kind of stuff that only existed in the top hero agencies and government facilities. Their tour guide was a middle-aged woman in a crisp lab coat, Dr. Tanaka, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She led them through sterile hallways lined with observation windows, pointing out various research projects with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. "This is our genetics lab, where we study inherited quirk traits. Over here we have materials testing for support gear, and this section is classified, so we'll be moving past it quickly." Izuku's eyes locked onto the restricted area as they walked by. Through the reinforced glass, he caught glimpses of containment units and warning signs he couldn't quite read from this distance. His notebook was already out, scribbling down everything he could see. "What kind of classified research?" he asked, raising his hand. Dr. Tanaka barely glanced at him. "The kind that's classified for a reason, moving on." But Izuku's mind was already racing. What could be so secret that they couldn't even hint at it? New quirk research, support gear prototypes, something related to villain rehabilitation. The tour continued through several more labs and testing facilities. Izuku filled 3 pages of notes while his classmates grew increasingly bored. Even the demonstrations of prototype support gear only held their attention for a few minutes. By the time they reached the cafeteria for lunch, half the class was complaining about wanting to go home. "This place is so lame," one of his classmates groaned. "I thought we'd see actual heroes or something." "At least the food's decent," another replied. Izuku wasn't paying attention to their complaints. He was still thinking about that restricted section, the glimpses he'd caught of containment units and biohazard symbols. While everyone else focused on their lunches, he found himself staring back the way they'd come. There had to be a bathroom around here somewhere, right? And if he happened to get turned around on the way back. "I'll be right back," he told the kid sitting next to him, who just grunted in acknowledgement. The hallways were quieter now, most of the staff probably at lunch themselves. Izuku retraced their steps, trying to look casual as he made his way back toward the restricted section. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was definitely against the rules, but his curiosity was stronger than his common sense. It always was. The The restricted area was behind several sets of security doors, but the main corridor that ran past it was accessible. Izuku pressed himself against the reinforced glass, trying to get a better look at the research inside. The lab was bigger than he'd initially thought, with multiple containment units lining the walls. Most were empty, but a few held objects he couldn't identify, fragments of what looked like meteorite, some kind of crystalline formations, and in the far corner, a sealed chamber containing what appeared to be a pool of black liquid. Extraterrestrial biological samples, he read from a partially visible label. His eyes widened. No way! He was so absorbed in trying to read the rest of the documentation that he didn't hear the footsteps behind him until it was too late. Well, look what we have here. Izuku spun around, his stomach dropping as he found himself face to face with Bakugo and two of his usual cronies. Of course. Of all the times for Bakugo to decide to wander off, it had to be now. Just taking a little detour, Deku. Bakugo's smile was all teeth and malice. Trying to pretend you belong in a place like this. I was just... Izuku started backing toward the wall, but there was nowhere to go. I was looking for the bathroom. Sure you were. Bakugo stepped closer, small explosions crackling in his palms. You know what I think? I think you're trying to steal something. Hoping maybe you can buy yourself a quirk if you grab the right piece of tech. That's not... I wouldn't you? The explosions grew brighter. Face it, Deku, you're so desperate to be special that you'd do anything. But you know what? You'll always be nothing, just a quirkless loser who can't accept reality. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Izuku felt tears prick at his eyes, that familiar combination of shame and anger rising in his chest. He pressed back against the wall, wishing he could disappear entirely. That's when his elbow hit the emergency release. The alarm was deafening, a piercing shriek that echoed through the entire facility. Red lights flashed along the corridor as the containment chamber behind the glass began to open with a mechanical hiss. What did you do? Bakugo shouted over the noise. Izuku stared in horror as the sealed chamber split apart, revealing the pool of black liquid he'd seen earlier. It wasn't sitting still anymore. It was moving, flowing upward like it was defying gravity, reaching toward the breach in its containment. We need to run, Izuku said, but his voice was lost in the alarm. We need to... The black substance erupted from its container with violent force, shattering the reinforced glass like it was made of paper. Izuku threw himself to the side, but not fast enough. The liquid hit him square in the chest, knocking him backward into the wall. It was cold. That was his first coherent thought as the substance spread across his body. Cold and somehow alive. He could feel it moving under his shirt, seeping through the fabric and onto his skin. When he tried to scream, nothing came out. Bakugo was yelling something, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. The black liquid was covering more of Izuku's body now, creeping up his neck and down his arms. Where it touched, his skin tingled with an electric sensation that was somewhere between painful and pleasant. Don't fight it, a voice whispered in his head. Not his voice, something else entirely. We need each other. Get it off, Izuku finally managed to scream, clawing at the substance. But his hands passed right through it like trying to grab smoke. Help me! For once in his life, Bakugo looked genuinely terrified. He took a step forward, then stopped, explosions flickering uncertainly in his palms. Behind him, his friends had already started running. The black substance reached Izuku's face, and suddenly the world went dark. The last thing he heard was the sound of running footsteps and shouting voices, growing more distant by the second. Then there was nothing but silence and the sensation of falling into an endless black void. When the security team finally arrived, they found Izuku Midoriya unconscious on the floor, completely normal except for the fact that he was somehow 3 feet away from where the incident had occurred. The containment chamber was empty, its previous contents nowhere to be found. The black substance had simply vanished, as if it had never existed at all. But if they had looked closer, if they had thought to check his shadow, they might have noticed that it moved just a fraction of a second after he did, like it was learning to mimic his movements. Like it was learning to be human. Izuku woke up in a hospital bed with his mother crying over him. That should have been his first clue that something was seriously wrong, but honestly, it took him a few minutes to remember why he was there in the first place. His head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and there was a weird taste in his mouth, metallic and sharp, like he'd been chewing on pennies. Oh, Izuku! His mother threw her arms around him the moment his eyes opened, nearly knocking the wind out of his lungs. I was so worried. The school called and said there was an accident and they rushed you to the hospital, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. Mom, he croaked, his voice coming out rougher than usual. I'm okay. What happened? That's when it started coming back. The field trip, the restricted lab, Bakugo cornering him, the black liquid that had felt so impossibly alive. His hand shot to his chest, patting frantically at the spot where the substance had first touched him. Nothing, just his normal skin under the hospital gown, maybe a little paler than usual. The doctor said you had some kind of allergic reaction, his mother continued, wiping tears from her cheeks. But they couldn't find any traces of whatever caused it. Your classmate, Bakugo, he told them you were near some kind of chemical spill, but the facility is saying there was no spill, no breach of containment. Izuku frowned. That didn't sound right. He distinctly remembered the alarm, the shattering glass, the black substance erupting from its container. Unless they're lying. Izuku nearly jumped out of his skin. The voice had come from inside his head, but it definitely wasn't his own thoughts. It was deeper, more aggressive, with an edge that made his teeth hurt. "What?" he said out loud, then quickly looked at his mother to see if she'd heard. She was still talking, something about insurance and medical bills, completely oblivious to the fact that her son was apparently losing his mind. The humans in white coats, they know what happened. They're covering it up. There it was again. Izuku's heart started racing, but he forced himself to stay calm. Head injuries could cause auditory hallucinations, right? That had to be it. Some kind of concussion from when he'd hit the wall. Except he didn't feel like he had a concussion. If anything, he felt better than he had in months, stronger, more alert. Even the perpetual ache in his shoulder from Bakugo's latest accident was completely gone. The doctor came in a few minutes later, a tired-looking woman with graying hair who seemed just as confused as everyone else. She ran through a battery of tests, checking his reflexes, his vision, asking him to follow her finger with his eyes. Everything came back normal. "I'd like to keep you for observation overnight," she said, making notes on her chart. "Just to be safe. But honestly, aside from some elevated adrenaline levels, you seem perfectly fine. Whatever happened to you, your body appears to have metabolized it completely." If only she knew. Izuku bit down on his tongue to keep from responding to the voice. His mother squeezed his hand and promised to bring him some real food later, since the hospital meals were apparently terrible. After she left, promising to be back first thing in the morning, Izuku was finally alone with his thoughts. And apparently someone else's thoughts too. "You can hear us." "This isn't real," Izuku whispered to the empty room. "I'm having some kind of breakdown, stress-induced psychosis or something. Look at your hands." Despite every rational part of his brain screaming at him not to, Izuku looked down at his hands. They looked normal, maybe a little paler than usual, but normal, nothing strange or wait. He flexed his fingers, and for just a split second, he could swear he saw something dark ripple under his skin. Like a shadow moving beneath the surface. "We are not a hallucination." "Then what are you?" The words tumbled out before he could stop them. "We are Venom, and you are our host." The room went very, very quiet after that. Izuku stared at his hands, watching for that strange, rippling movement under his skin. When it came again, he didn't flinch. "You're the black stuff from the lab. We prefer symbiotic organism, but yes. We bonded with you during the incident." "Bonded?" Izuku's voice was flat. "Like, permanently. We need each other now. You provide us with what we require to survive. In return, we make you better." "Better how?" Instead of answering, Venom did something that made Izuku's entire body tense with sudden, incredible strength. He gripped the bed rail without thinking and crushed it. The metal crumpled in his fingers like aluminum foil. "Holy?" Izuku stared at the destroyed rail, then at his hands. "How is that possible?" "We enhance your physical capabilities. Strength, speed, reflexes. We can do much more, but you must learn to work with us." Izuku's mind was racing. Enhanced physical abilities, that sounded exactly like. "I have a quirk," he breathed. "We do not understand this term." "A quirk, a superpower." "An ability?" Izuku was grinning now, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Everyone said I was quirkless, that I'd never amount to anything, but I have a quirk." He wanted to call his mother, call everyone, tell them that Izuku Midoriya finally had a power of his own. He wasn't useless anymore. He could be a hero just like he'd always dreamed. "Your enthusiasm is strange, but we suppose it works in our favor." "What else can we do?" Izuku asked, practically bouncing in the hospital bed despite the IV in his arm. "You said you could do more." "Many things, but not here, too many watching eyes." "That was probably smart." Izuku forced himself to calm down, but the excitement was still bubbling under his skin. After 15 years of being nobody special, of being the kid everyone pitied or ignored, he finally had something that made him unique. The rest of the night passed in a blur of whispered conversations with his new partner, passenger. Venom seemed to prefer symbiote, which sounded scientific and important. They talked about basic things, how the bond worked, what Venom needed to survive, apparently adrenaline and other brain chemicals, and why they had chosen Izuku. You were dying, Venom explained when he asked about that last part. Not physically, but inside. We could taste your desperation, your hunger to be more than what you were. It called to us. That should have been insulting, but somehow it wasn't. It was just true. The next morning, his mother arrived with a bag of his clothes and a huge smile. The doctors cleared him for discharge after one final round of tests, and soon Izuku was sitting in the passenger seat of his mother's car, watching the city scroll by outside the window. "I called the school," his mother said as they drove. "You can take the rest of the week off to recover, though honestly you look better than you have in months." She was right. Izuku could see his reflection in the side mirror and he looked healthier. His skin had better color, his eyes were brighter, and there was something in his posture that hadn't been there before. Confidence, maybe. "We told you, we make you better." When they got home, Izuku made it exactly 30 seconds before he was in his room with the door locked, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Okay," he whispered, "show me what we can do. Hold out your hand." Izuku extended his right hand, palm up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then black tendrils began to seep out from under his skin, coiling around his fingers like living ink. The sensation was bizarre but not unpleasant, like having a dozen small snakes moving under his sleeve. The tendrils solidified, forming what looked like claws extending from his fingertips. Sharp, gleaming black claws that looked like they could cut through steel. "Incredible," Izuku breathed. "This is nothing. Watch." The black substance spread further, flowing up his arm and across his chest. Everywhere it touched, Izuku felt his strength increase exponentially. When it reached his face, the world suddenly became sharper, more detailed. He could hear his mother moving around in the kitchen downstairs, could smell what she was cooking for lunch, could even detect the neighbor's cat sleeping in the garden outside. "We can give you much more than claws," Venom said, and suddenly Izuku's entire perspective shifted. He was looking at himself in the mirror, but it wasn't himself anymore. The black substance had covered his entire body, forming what looked like a sleek, organic suit. His reflection showed white spider-like markings across the chest, and where his face should be, there was smooth black surface broken only by two large white eye shapes. "We are Venom," the voice said, but now it was coming from his mouth as well as inside his head. The sound was deeper, more resonant than his normal voice. "And we are magnificent." "This is," Izuku, or Venom, raised one clawed hand to touch the mirror. "This is incredible. I look like a real hero." "Hero?" There was amusement in the voice now. "We are something far more interesting than a hero." But Izuku was already imagining himself fighting alongside All Might, saving people, proving that he wasn't just some quirkless nobody. He had power now. Real power. The kind that could change everything. "We should hunt," Venom suggested. "There are criminals in this city, bad humans who hurt others. We could find them, stop them." "Stop them how?" Permanently. Something cold settled in Izuku's stomach. "You mean kill them? They prey on the innocent. Why should they be allowed to continue?" The black substance began to recede, revealing Izuku's normal appearance again. He stared at his reflection, mind racing. That wasn't how heroes worked. Heroes saved people, they didn't kill criminals. They captured them, brought them to justice, gave them a chance to reform. "We can't just kill people," he said firmly. "That's not what heroes do. Heroes." Venom's mental voice dripped with disdain. "Your heroes are weak. They let evil flourish because they're too afraid to do what's necessary." "That's not true. Heroes like All Might save people every day. They inspire others to be better." They fail. How many people die while your heroes play by rules that their enemies ignore?" Izuku didn't have a good answer for that. He'd seen the crime statistics, knew that even in a world full of professional heroes, bad things still happen to good people. But that didn't mean the solution was to start killing criminals. "We'll find another way," he said finally. "We'll stop bad guys, but we'll do it right, the heroic way." "You are naive," Venom replied, but there was something almost fond in the mental voice. "But we suppose we can try your methods first. When they fail, you will understand." That night, Izuku lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning with possibilities. He had a quirk now, a powerful one from the looks of it. He could be a hero, attend Yue, make his mother proud. All his dreams were finally within reach. So why did he feel like he'd made some kind of deal with the devil? "We are not evil," Venom said, apparently reading his thoughts. "We simply understand that sometimes, to protect the innocent, one must become something the guilty fear." "And what's that?" "A monster." Izuku closed his eyes and tried not to think about how much sense that made. 3 days after the hospital, Izuku had established what he liked to think of as ground rules for his relationship with Venom. Rule number 1, no killing, ever. Rule number 2, no seriously injuring people unless they were actively trying to kill someone else. Rule number 3, no taking control of his body without permission. Venom had opinions about these rules, very loud, very sarcastic opinions. Your rules will get innocent people killed, the symbiote grumbled as Izuku walked to school Monday morning. It had been doing this for the better part of an hour now, a running commentary on everything from Izuku's choice of breakfast, too healthy, to his route to school, too predictable, easy to ambush. My rules will keep us from becoming villains, Izuku muttered under his breath, then quickly looked around to make sure no one had heard him talking to himself. There is a difference between a villain and someone who does what must be done. Not to heroes there isn't. Izuku was getting pretty good at having these internal arguments without showing it on his face. It helped that he'd had plenty of practice hiding his emotions from people like Bakugo over the years. The thought of Bakugo made his stomach twist with anxiety. He hadn't seen his former childhood friend since the incident at the research facility, and he had no idea what Bakugo might have told people about what happened. The official story was some kind of chemical spill, but Bakugo had seen the black substance attack Izuku directly. How much did he remember? How much did he understand? Why do you care what the explosive child thinks? Because he could expose us, Izuku replied mentally. If he tells people what he really saw, then we silence him. We are not silencing Bakugo. A few students walking nearby gave him odd looks, and Izuku realized he'd said that last part out loud. Great, now people were going to think he was developing some kind of nervous condition on top of being quirkless. Except he wasn't quirkless anymore, was he? The thought sent a familiar thrill through his chest. For the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya had a quirk. A powerful one if Venom was to be believed. He could be a hero now. He could attend UA, fight alongside All Might, save people who needed saving. He just had to figure out how to do it without letting his symbiotic partner turn him into a monster. School was weird. Izuku had expected more questions about the incident, maybe some rumors or gossip, but most of his classmates seemed to have already moved on. The official story about a chemical spill was boring enough that nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody except Bakugo. Izuku felt those familiar red eyes boring into the back of his skull all through first period. Every time he turned around, Bakugo was staring at him with an expression Izuku couldn't quite read. It wasn't his usual sneer or look of contempt, it was something else, something almost like fear. He knows something is different about you, Venom observed during their lunch break. His heart rate increases when he looks at you. He's afraid. Izuku poked at his bento box, suddenly not very hungry. Good. Maybe he'll leave me alone for once. Or maybe he'll try to hurt you and we'll have to hurt him back. We're not hurting Bakugo, even if he attacks you first. Izuku didn't answer that, mostly because he didn't have a good answer. Bakugo had been tormenting him for years with increasingly dangerous pranks and outright assaults. If he escalated things further, if he actually tried to seriously injure Izuku, we could make him respect you, Venom suggested, apparently sensing the direction of his thoughts. One demonstration of our power, and he would never bother you again. And then what? He tells everyone I have some kind of terrifying quirk that turns me into a monster. He reports me to the authorities as a potential villain. Let him try. We would. No. Izuku's mental voice was firm. We handle Bakugo the same way we handle everyone else. Carefully, quietly. No unnecessary violence. Venom went silent after that, but Izuku could feel the symbiote's irritation simmering under his skin like a low-grade fever. The confrontation came, inevitably, after school. Izuku was taking his usual route home, the long way that avoided most of the areas where Bakugo and his friends liked to hang out, when he heard the shouting. At first, he thought it might be some kind of sports practice or maybe just kids fooling around, but as he got closer, the voices became clearer. Give it back, you bastards. What's the matter, kid? Gonna cry? Izuku peered around the corner and felt his heart sink. 3 high school students, definitely not from his school, probably from one of the rougher districts, had cornered a boy who couldn't be more than 10 years old. The kid's backpack was torn open, its contents scattered across the ground, and one of the teenagers was dangling what looked like a handheld game system just out of the boy's reach. Predators, Venom hissed. They enjoy the child's fear. For once, Izuku was in complete agreement with his symbiotic partner. Hey! Izuku stepped out from around the corner, his hands shaking slightly. He'd never actually confronted bullies before, usually he was too busy being bullied himself, but he couldn't just walk away. "Leave him alone!" The three teenagers turned to look at him, and Izuku immediately realized he'd made a serious tactical error. These weren't middle school bullies like Bakugo. These were actual thugs, probably dropouts, definitely the kind of people who wouldn't hesitate to beat up a scrawny kid for interfering with their fun. The biggest one, a guy with a mohawk and facial piercings, grinned nastily. "Oh yeah, and what are you gonna do about it, Twig?" "Now would be an excellent time to reconsider our rules," Venom suggested. Izuku's mouth went dry, but he stood his ground. "I said leave him alone. Take his stuff and go, but stop scaring him." "Take his stuff," Mohawk laughed. "Kid, I think you're confused about how this works. See, we were just having some fun with our little friend here, and now you've gone and made it our business to have some fun with you too." The other two were spreading out, trying to flank Izuku. Standard intimidation tactics. He'd seen Bakugo use the same approach dozens of times. "They mean to hurt you," Venom said. "They mean to hurt the child. This is what we were made for. Just give him back his game and walk away," Izuku said, his voice cracking slightly. "Nobody has to get hurt. Nobody has to get hurt." Mohawk stepped closer, cracking his knuckles. "Kid, somebody's definitely gonna get hurt. Question is whether it's just you, or if we decide to take it out on the little brat too." That did it. Izuku felt something snap inside his chest, a flood of anger and protectiveness that was definitely his own, mixed with something darker and hungrier that belonged to Venom. The symbiote surged upward through his body like liquid fire, and suddenly the world became sharper, more focused. "Yes," Venom purred. "Let us show them what happens to those who prey on the innocent." The transformation was faster this time, smoother. Black tendrils erupted from Izuku's skin, spreading across his body in seconds. His clothes disappeared beneath the dark substance, replaced by the sleek, organic-looking suit he'd seen in his bedroom mirror. His fingertips extended into razor-sharp claws, and when he spoke, his voice carried that deep, resonant quality that made people's teeth ache. "We said," Venom growled through Izuku's mouth, "leave him alone." The effect was immediate and dramatic. All three teenagers stumbled backward, their faces going pale. The kid they'd been tormenting scrambled away, clutching his rescued game system, but Izuku, Venom, barely noticed. All of their attention was focused on the three bullies who were now backing toward the mouth of the alley. "They're trying to run," Venom observed with satisfaction. "Shall we let them?" The smart thing would be to let them go. They'd learned their lesson, the kid was safe, nobody was seriously hurt. Mission accomplished. But Mohawk, apparently having recovered from his initial shock, pulled out a knife. "What the hell are you supposed to be?" he snarled, trying to cover his fear with aggression. "Some kind of freak. Stay back or I'll cut you. He threatens us with a blade," Venom said, and there was dark amusement in the mental voice. "How quaint." The symbiote moved faster than human reflexes could follow. One moment Mohawk was pointing his knife at them, the next he was hanging upside down from a fire escape, wrapped in black webbing with the knife embedded in a brick wall 15 feet away. His two friends tried to run. They made it exactly 3 steps before black tendrils erupted from the ground beneath their feet, tripping them up and leaving them tangled in more of that strange webbing. "Efficient," Venom noted with satisfaction. "Now we can question them properly." "Question them about what?" Izuku asked, but he already had a sinking feeling he knew where this was going, about their other crimes, other victims. "We can make sure they never hurt anyone again." Venom approached the upside-down thug with slow, predatory steps. When they spoke, their voice carried a note of barely contained violence that made the man whimper. "How many others?" they asked. What? How many other children have you terrorized? How much money have you stolen? How many innocents have suffered because of your actions?" We don't, please man, we were just messing around." "Lies," Venom hissed. "We can taste his deception." One clawed hand reached out to trace the man's cheek just hard enough to leave thin red lines. The thug's eyes rolled back in terror. "Please," he sobbed. "Please don't kill me." "An excellent idea," Venom purred. "No," Izuku's voice cut through the symbiote's predatory haze. "We don't kill people, that's the rule." "Your rules are naive. These humans will simply find new victims once we release them. Then we make sure they don't. We report them to the police, let the justice system handle it." The justice system that allows children to be terrorized in broad daylight. Around them, a crowd was starting to gather. People with phones taking pictures and videos. Someone was probably calling the police right now, or maybe the heroes. "We have to go," Izuku said. "People are watching. Let them watch. Let them see what happens to those who prey on the weak." But Izuku was already pulling the symbiote back, forcing the black substance to retreat. The transformation reversed itself, leaving him standing in the alley in his normal clothes, breathing hard and shaking with adrenaline. The three thugs were still wrapped in webbing, still hanging from various surfaces around the alley. They'd be stuck there until the authorities arrived, but they were alive and unharmed except for a few shallow scratches. "You are making a mistake," Venom warned. "They will not learn, they will not change. And next time there may not be anyone to stop them." Izuku didn't answer. He was too busy trying to process what had just happened. The way Venom had moved through his body, the casual violence, the hunger for more. The symbiote hadn't just wanted to stop the bullies, it had wanted to hurt them. Permanently. Someone in the crowd was shouting about calling for heroes. Others were speculating about what kind of quirk could do something like that. A few were already posting videos to social media. Izuku ran. By the time he got home, his transformation was already trending on social media. Number Symbiote Hero was getting thousands of posts, most of them blurry phone videos of his confrontation with the thugs. The news networks had picked it up too. He caught a glimpse of his black-suited form on a TV screen in a shop window, with a banner reading "New Quirk Type EMERGES in Tokyo." His mother was waiting for him when he walked through the door, her face pale and worried. "Izuku," she said carefully, "there's something on the news I think you should see." They sat together on the couch and watched as a reporter discussed the mysterious new hero who had appeared in downtown Tokyo. The footage was shaky and dark, but it clearly showed someone in a black, organic-looking costume subduing three criminals with some kind of web-based quirk. "The individual's identity remains unknown," the reporter continued, but several quirk analysts are calling this a completely unprecedented manifestation. The ability to apparently transform one's entire body into what appears to be a living costume, combined with enhanced physical capabilities and projectile webbing, suggests either an incredibly rare mutation-type quirk or possibly even a new category altogether. Izuku's mother turned to look at him with knowing eyes. "So," she said quietly, "when were you planning to tell me about your quirk?" There was no point in denying it. His mother had raised him for 15 years, she could read him like an open book. "It just manifested," he said, which was technically true. "After the accident at the research facility, I was going to tell you, but I wanted to understand it better first. And you decided to understand it by fighting criminals." Her voice was strained, caught between pride and terror. "I couldn't just walk away, they were hurting a little kid." "At least she recognizes your heroic nature," Venom commented, "even if she fails to appreciate our methods." His mother sighed, pulling him into a hug that smelled like home and safety and everything he'd been afraid of losing. "I'm proud of you for wanting to help people," she said. "But Izuku, you can't just go around fighting criminals without training. You could get hurt, or worse, you could hurt someone else." "We would never hurt the innocent," Venom protested. But that wasn't entirely true, was it? Venom had definitely wanted to hurt those thugs, and not in a nice, non-lethal, heroic way, if Izuku hadn't stopped the symbiote. "I know," he said. "I'll be more careful. Maybe I can find a way to train, learn to use my quirk properly." "Like at a hero school?" his mother asked hopefully. Before Izuku could answer, there was a knock at their door. They both froze. It was almost 8 o'clock, well past the time when neighbors might drop by for a casual visit. The knock came again, polite but insistent. Someone with considerable strength, Venom observed, and, familiar, we have encountered this scent before. Izuku's mother went to answer the door and Izuku heard her gasp. "Oh my goodness, All Might!" Izuku's heart stopped. "Good evening, ma'am," came that unmistakable voice. "I was hoping I could speak with young Midoriya. I believe he and I have something important to discuss." All Might was at his door. All Might wanted to talk to him. "The #1 hero," Venom said, and there was something like anticipation in the mental voice. "This should be interesting." Izuku walked to the door on unsteady legs, and there he was. All Might in all his ridiculous, inspiring, impossible glory, standing in the hallway of their tiny apartment building like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Hello, young Midoriya," the symbol of peace said with that trademark grin. "I think it's time we had a chat about heroism, don't you?" Izuku's mother insisted on making tea. It was such a normal, domestic response to having the #1 hero sitting in their tiny living room that Izuku almost laughed. Almost. He was too nervous to actually laugh, especially with Venom providing a running commentary on All Might's physical condition. "He's injured," the symbiote observed as All Might politely accepted a cup of tea. "Old wounds, extensive scarring across his torso, and there's something else." "Something else?" Izuku thought back, but Venom had gone quiet, apparently focused on studying their unexpected guest. All Might looked exactly like he did on TV and in magazines. Impossibly broad shoulders, that perfect smile, the kind of presence that filled a room just by existing. But up close in the soft light of their apartment, Izuku could see details that the cameras never captured. Tiny lines around his eyes, a slight stiffness in how he held himself. The way his smile flickered just a fraction when he thought no one was looking. "I have to say," All Might began, setting down his teacup, "that was quite an impressive display today, young Midoriya." Izuku's mother nearly dropped her own cup. "You saw that? I make it my business to keep track of new quirk manifestations, especially ones as unique as your son's appears to be." All Might's eyes never left Izuku's face. "Tell me, when did this ability first manifest?" "Last week," Izuku said, which was true, after the incident at the research facility. "Ah, yes, I heard about that. Chemical spill, was it?" There was something in All Might's tone that suggested he knew exactly how much of the official story was actually true. Izuku felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Something like that? He knows more than he's saying," Venom noted. "Be careful." All Might leaned back in his chair, still wearing that trademark smile, but his eyes had gone serious. "You know, in all my years as a hero, I've seen thousands of different quirks. Emitter types, transformation types, mutant types, and every variation in between. But I've never seen anything quite like what you displayed today." "Is that bad?" Izuku asked. "Not bad necessarily, but unusual. The way your quirk seems to completely transform your body, the apparent sentience of the material itself, the level of violence it seems to encourage." All Might paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's the kind of power that could very easily be misused." "He fears us," Venom said with satisfaction. "Good, he should." Izuku's mother set down her teacup with a soft clink. "Are you here to arrest my son?" "Arrest him?" "Good heavens, no." All Might's laugh was genuine. "Quite the opposite, actually. I'm here because I think he has tremendous potential, but potential can be a dangerous thing without proper guidance." The hero stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over their modest neighborhood. "Tell me, young Midoriya, why did you intervene today? You could have walked away, called the authorities, waited for a professional hero to handle the situation. Instead, you put yourself at risk to help a stranger." "Why?" The question caught Izuku off guard, not because he didn't know the answer, but because it seemed so obvious. "Because no one else was there," he said. "Because that kid needed help and I was the only one who could provide it. Even though you had no formal training. Even though you barely understand your own quirk." Yes, simple, direct, honest. Even Venom seemed to approve. Perhaps this hero is not as naive as the others. All Might turned back to face him, and for a moment the perfect smile was replaced by something more genuine. "More human? That," he said, "is exactly what I was hoping you'd say." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Izuku had ever experienced. All Might talked about heroism in ways that went far beyond the sanitized version taught in schools or presented in the media. He spoke about the weight of responsibility, the burden of making life-and-death decisions in split seconds, the psychological toll of constantly putting others' lives before your own. "Power without control is destruction," All Might said at one point. "But control without compassion is tyranny. The greatest heroes are those who can balance both." "Interesting philosophy," Venom commented. "Though he seems to underestimate the value of fear as a deterrent." "Your quirk," All Might continued, "appears to have a distinct personality of its own. Is that assessment accurate?" Izuku hesitated. This was dangerous territory. If All Might knew too much about Venom's true nature, "It has opinions," he said finally, "about how situations should be handled. And do these opinions ever conflict with your own moral compass?" "All the time," Venom said dryly. "Sometimes," Izuku admitted. All Might nodded as if this was exactly what he'd expected to hear. "That's what concerns me, a quirk that encourages violence, that has its own agenda. That's the kind of power that has created some of our most dangerous villains." Izuku's mother made a small, worried sound, but All Might held up a hand. "However," he continued, "it's also the kind of power that could create our greatest heroes. The difference lies not in the nature of the power itself, but in the character of the person who wields it." "He's testing you," Venom realized. "This entire conversation is an evaluation." "What are you saying?" Izuku asked. All Might was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city lights. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on the entire room. "I'm saying that I'd like to offer you something. Training, guidance. The chance to become the hero I believe you have the potential to be." Izuku's heart stopped. "You mean?" I mean UA High School has a recommendation program for exceptional cases. With the right preparation, the right training, I believe you could not only pass the entrance exam but excel in their hero course. Too good to be true, Venom warned. What does he want in return? But All Might continued, and there was the catch. Such training would require absolute honesty between us. About your quirk, about its personality, about everything. No secrets, no hidden agendas. Can you agree to that? Izuku looked at his mother, who was gripping her teacup so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Then he looked back at All Might, at this impossible opportunity that had literally knocked on his door. Yes, he said. I can agree to that. Can we? Venom asked pointedly. We'll figure it out, Izuku thought back. All Might's smile returned, brighter than before. Excellent. In that case, I'd like you to meet me tomorrow after school. There's a beach not far from here, Dagoba Municipal Beach. Do you know it? Izuku nodded. He'd been there a few times as a kid, back before it became a dumping ground for old appliances and garbage. Good. We'll start with some basic physical conditioning and quirk control exercises. Nothing too strenuous at first. We need to understand exactly what we're working with before we can begin serious training. After All Might left, promising to see Izuku the next day, the apartment felt strangely empty. His mother sat in stunned silence for several minutes before finally speaking. All Might wants to train you personally, she said, as if saying it out loud would make it feel more real. Yeah, for UA, yeah. She was quiet for another moment, then suddenly she was crying and hugging him and laughing all at the same time. I'm so proud of you, she whispered into his hair. Your father would be so proud. Touching, Venom commented, but there was no sarcasm in the mental voice. She loves you very much. That night, Izuku lay in bed staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. All Might the All Might wanted to train him, personally. For UA, it was like every dream he'd ever had suddenly coming true at once. You realize this complicates things, Venom said. How so? He wants complete honesty. What happens when he discovers that your quirk is actually an alien parasite with a taste for violence? Izuku had been trying not to think about that particular problem. We'll tell him the truth, eventually. When the time is right, and if he decides we're too dangerous, if he concludes that you're better off without us, that won't happen. You cannot know that. Venom was right, but Izuku refused to let doubt creep in. This was his chance, maybe his only chance, to become a real hero. He couldn't let fear sabotage it before he'd even started. The next day dragged by with agonizing slowness. Izuku barely paid attention in any of his classes, too focused on the meeting with All Might to concentrate on anything else. Even Bakugo's suspicious stares couldn't dampen his excitement. The explosive child is planning something, Venom observed during lunch. His stress levels have been elevated all day. Izuku glanced over at Bakugo, who was indeed looking more agitated than usual. But whatever Bakugo was planning would have to wait. Right now, nothing mattered except meeting All Might. Dagoba Municipal Beach was exactly as depressing as Izuku remembered. What had once been a beautiful stretch of sand and surf was now buried under decades of illegally dumped trash. Refrigerators, washing machines, old cars, construction debris, it looked more like a junkyard than a beach. All Might was waiting for him, but not the All Might from the night before. This version was smaller, thinner. His iconic costume was replaced by a simple yellow tracksuit, and his famous smile looked strained around the edges. Injury, Venom said immediately. Severe. Recent. He's been concealing the extent of his condition. Ah, young Midoriya, All Might called out, waving him over. Right on time. I hope you're ready to work because today we're going to push your limits. Are you okay? Izuku asked, unable to ignore how different All Might looked. The hero's smile flickered. Just a bit tired from a long patrol last night. Nothing to worry about. Now shall we begin? The training was unlike anything Izuku had expected. Instead of flashy combat moves or quirk techniques, All Might had him moving trash. Specifically, he wanted Izuku to use his symbiote abilities to clear sections of the beach. Physical conditioning is the foundation of all heroic training, All Might explained as Izuku struggled with a waterlogged refrigerator. A strong body supports a strong quirk, and a strong quirk serves a strong heart. This is tedious, Venom complained after an hour of garbage removal. When do we get to the real training? This is the real training, Izuku panted, dragging yet another piece of junk toward the growing pile they'd created. Moving refuse is not combat preparation. But as the afternoon wore on, Izuku began to understand what All Might was really doing. Every piece of trash required him to use his quirk differently, sometimes for enhanced strength, sometimes for the webbing to secure awkward loads, sometimes for the clawed appendages to cut through tangled metal. He was learning control through repetition, building muscle memory for his transformations. More importantly, he was learning to work with Venom instead of against the symbiote. The hero is more clever than we initially assessed, Venom admitted grudgingly. He's teaching us cooperation through shared labor. By the time the sun started to set, they'd cleared a substantial section of the beach. Izuku was exhausted, covered in grime and sweat, but he felt accomplished, like he'd actually achieved something meaningful. Not bad for a first day, All Might said, surveying their work. Though I suspect your quirk did most of the heavy lifting. We worked together, Izuku said, then immediately wondered if that sounded weird. All Might gave him a sharp look. We, careful, Venom warned. I mean, me and my quirk. It feels like working with a partner sometimes. Interesting. All Might was quiet for a moment, then nodded. That level of integration is actually quite advanced. Most people with transformation quirks don't develop that kind of symbiotic relationship with their abilities until years of training. Symbiotic, if only he knew. However, All Might continued, I noticed something else during today's training. Your quirk seems to have preferences, opinions about how tasks should be completed. Is that accurate? There was no point in lying. All Might was too observant, too experienced. Yes, sometimes it wants to do things differently than I do. More violently, Izuku nodded reluctantly. All Might was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves crash against the polluted shore. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, more personal. Power that comes with its own will is the most dangerous kind, he said, but it's also the most potentially valuable. The key is learning to synthesize your moral compass with your quirk's instincts, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. He speaks as if from experience, Venom observed. What is he not telling us? How do I do that? Izuku asked. All Might turned to face him, and for just a moment the facade of the perfect hero slipped. What Izuku saw underneath was something raw and tired and achingly human. By never compromising on what you believe is right, All Might said. No matter how much easier it would be to take the violent path, no matter how much more effective the brutal solution might seem. The moment you start making exceptions, the moment you decide that the ends justify any means, that's when you stop being a hero and become something else entirely. Something like us, Venom said quietly. The training continued for weeks. Every day after school, Izuku would meet All Might at the beach and spend hours moving trash, practicing control, learning to integrate his human moral compass with Venom's more pragmatic instincts. Slowly, gradually, they were making progress. The beach was getting cleaner, Izuku was getting stronger, and most importantly, he was learning to truly work with Venom instead of just accommodating the symbiote's presence. You have grown, Venom acknowledged one evening as they wrapped up another training session. Both physically and otherwise. Otherwise, you are becoming something neither fully human nor fully like us, something new. Izuku wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. It was during their third week of training that All Might finally revealed the real reason he was pushing Izuku so hard. There's something I need to tell you, the hero said as they sat on a relatively clean section of beach, watching the sunset. Something about why I chose you for this training. Here it comes, Venom said. All Might looked older somehow, more fragile than the symbol of peace that appeared on television every night. My quirk, he said carefully, isn't exactly what people think it is. Izuku waited, sensing that this was important. It's not a quirk I was born with. It's something that was passed down to me from hero to hero, generation to generation. And now, he turned to look at Izuku directly. Now I want to pass it down to you. The world seemed to stop. Izuku could hear his own heartbeat, could feel Venom's sudden, intense focus, could smell the salt air and the distant scent of rain. You want to give me your quirk, he whispered. It's called One for All Might said. And yes, I want to give it to you, but I need you to understand this isn't just about gaining more power. It's about inheriting a legacy, a responsibility that goes back generations. It's about becoming not just a hero, but the kind of hero who can inspire others to be their best selves. Another power, Venom said, and there was something like hunger in the mental voice. Layered on top of what we already share, the combination would be incredible, Izuku breathed, or catastrophic, All Might said quietly. That's what I've been trying to determine these past few weeks. Whether you have the character to handle this kind of responsibility, whether your quirks, influence, would corrupt the power I'm offering you. And All Might smiled, and for the first time since they'd started training, it was his real smile. Not the media-friendly grin, but something genuine and warm and proud. And I think you're ready to find out. The hair Izuku swallowed tasted exactly as disgusting as he'd expected. One for all is passed down by consuming DNA from the previous holder, All Might had explained, plucking a single golden strand from his head. I know it sounds revolting, but it's fine, Izuku had said and meant it. After weeks of having conversations with an alien symbiote, swallowing someone's hair barely registered on his personal scale of weird experiences. That had been 3 months ago. 3 months of grueling training, of learning to balance two completely different power sources, of mediating constant arguments between his own moral compass and Venom's more direct approach to problem solving. Now, standing outside the imposing gates of UA High School, Izuku felt like he might throw up. And not just from nerves. The additional power sits strangely within us, Venom observed, their mental voice tinged with something that might have been discomfort. It does not integrate as smoothly as we had hoped. That was putting it mildly. One for All and the symbiote didn't exactly play well together. Where Venom was fluid and adaptive, One for All was raw and explosive. Where the symbiote encouraged stealth and precision, One for All demanded overwhelming force. Trying to use both powers simultaneously was like trying to conduct two different orchestras at the same time. "We'll figure it out," Izuku muttered under his breath, then immediately looked around to make sure no one had heard him talking to himself. The last thing he needed was for other examinees to think he was having a nervous breakdown before the test even started. "Perhaps we should reconsider our strategy," Venom suggested. "Use only our abilities for the practical exam. The inherited power is too unstable, too likely to cause collateral damage." "No," Izuku's mental voice was firm. "All Might gave me One for All for a reason. I need to learn to use it properly, and that means using it when it matters. Even if it means failing this examination, even then." The crowd of examinees around him was intimidating. Kids with obvious physical mutations that suggested powerful quirks, others who carried themselves with the confidence that came from years of specialized training. Izuku felt painfully ordinary in comparison, despite the alien symbiote currently sharing his body and the legendary quirk now residing in his cells. "You are not ordinary," Venom said, apparently sensing his self-doubt. "You are something unprecedented, something that has never existed before." That should have been reassuring. Instead, it just made Izuku more nervous. "Excuse me," Izuku turned to find a tall boy with dark hair and glasses practically marching toward him. Everything about the newcomer screamed serious student. From his perfectly pressed uniform to his rigid posture to the way he moved like he was perpetually late for something important. "You were muttering under your breath," the boy said without preamble. "Talking to yourself is a sign of anxiety which can negatively impact test performance. As a fellow examinee, I felt obligated to point this out." "I do not like this one," Venom said immediately. "Too rigid, too judgmental." Thanks," Izuku managed. "I'll try to keep it down." "See that you do. This is UA's entrance exam, not a casual school event. We should all be taking it seriously." The boy started to walk away, then paused and turned back. "I'm Ida Tenya, by the way. I look forward to competing against you." "Midoriya Izuku," Izuku replied, but Ida was already striding toward the main building. "Pretentious," Venom commented, "and likely to be a problem if he decides to enforce more of his arbitrary rules." Before Izuku could respond, someone else bumped into him, a girl with short brown hair who was clearly trying to keep up with Ida's aggressive pace. "Sorry," she said, steadying herself with one hand on Izuku's arm. "That guy moves fast. Are you okay?" Physical contact, Venom noted with interest. Her quirk affects gravity. Localized manipulation, possibly touch-based activation. "I'm fine," Izuku said, then blinked. "Wait, how do you?" But the girl was already hurrying after Ida, leaving Izuku standing there wondering how Venom could possibly know what her quirk was from a single touch. "We told you before, we can sample genetic material, analyze quirk factors. Brief contact is usually sufficient for basic identification." "That's actually really useful, indeed. Though we still prefer our own methods for dealing with threats." The written portion of the exam was straightforward enough. Standard academic subjects, some basic hero law ethical scenarios that would have been easy even without All Might's coaching. Izuku finished with time to spare and spent the remaining minutes trying to calm his nerves for the practical portion. Present Mike's explanation of the combat trial was typically enthusiastic and typically loud. 3 types of robots with different point values, 10 minutes to rack up as many points as possible. Avoid the zero-point robot that was apparently just there to be an obstacle. Simple enough, Venom said as they were assigned to testing ground beta. We avoid other examinees, hunt robots efficiently, demonstrate power without revealing too much about our true nature. What about helping people if they get in trouble? Izuku asked mentally. What about it? They are our competition. Their failure increases our chances of success. That's not how heroes think. Perhaps that is why so many heroes fail when faced with truly difficult choices. The argument was interrupted by the massive doors of the testing ground sliding open. Present Mike's voice boomed across the facility. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Geo, Geo, Geo. The other examinees exploded into motion, racing through the entrance and scattering throughout the urban simulation. Izuku was slower off the mark, still trying to decide exactly how to approach this. Move, Venom urged. We are losing valuable time. Izuku broke into a run, letting the symbiote enhance his speed and agility as he navigated the mock city streets. The sounds of combat were already echoing from multiple directions: explosions, the screech of tearing metal, the occasional triumphant shout. His first robot was a one-pointer, about the size of a small car and armed with what looked like a pile driver. It spotted him before he spotted it, charging with mechanical determination. Ours, Venom said with satisfaction. The transformation was faster now, smoother after months of practice. Black tendrils erupted from Izuku's skin, forming the familiar organic suit. His fingers extended into claws, and he could feel his strength multiply as the symbiote integrated with his musculature. The robot's pile driver punched through empty air as Izuku Venom flowed around the attack, moving with inhuman fluidity. One clawed hand punched through the machine's chest plate, while the other tore off its head. The robot toppled with a satisfying crash. Efficient, Venom noted approvingly, but we need larger prey. They found a two-pointer next, then a three-pointer, systematically hunting through the urban environment. Each robot fell quickly to their combined abilities. Venom's speed and adaptability making short work of mechanical opponents designed to challenge normal human reflexes. We should use the inherited power, Venom suggested as they crouched on a rooftop, surveying the battlefield below. Test the combination. Not yet, Izuku replied. Too many people around. Too much risk of collateral damage, always so cautious. That's when they heard the scream. Both Izuku and Venom turned toward the sound, which had come from several blocks away. Through the symbiote's enhanced senses, they could smell fierce sweat and hear the distinctive whine of an overloading robot. Not our concern, Venom said firmly. We have our own objectives. But Izuku was already moving, flowing across rooftops with the symbiote's help. They crested a building and looked down to see a massive robot, easily 50 feet tall, bearing down on a girl with brown hair who was trapped under a piece of debris. The gravity girl from before the exam, Uraraka, he thought her name was, the zero-point robot Venom identified. We were warned to avoid it. We can't just leave her. We absolutely can. Her predicament is not our responsibility. It is if we can help. Izuku dropped from the rooftop, the symbiote cushioning his landing. Around him, other examinees were running away from the massive robot, smart enough to recognize a threat they couldn't handle. Only Izuku was moving toward it. This is tactically unsound, Venom protested. We gain nothing from this engagement. We save someone's life. Her life is not worth risking our future as a hero. If saving her life risks our future as a hero, then maybe we don't deserve to be heroes. That seemed to give Venom pause. The symbiote went quiet for a moment, then sighed mentally. Your moral certainty is simultaneously your greatest strength and your most frustrating weakness. The zero-point robot was almost on top of Uraraka now, one massive foot raised to crush her. She was trying to use her quirk on the debris, but something was wrong. Maybe she'd hit her weight limit. Maybe she was too injured to concentrate properly. Izuku reached for one for all. The power roared through his system like liquid lightning, every cell in his body suddenly burning with incredible energy. But instead of channeling it through his arm or leg like All Might had taught him, he tried to integrate it with Venom's abilities. The result was intense. Black tendrils erupted from his entire body, but now they crackled with green energy. His claws extended further than ever before, wreathed in the distinctive lightning of One for All. When he launched himself at the robot, he moved faster than he'd ever moved before. The impact was tremendous. Izuku Venom struck the robot's leg with the force of a small missile, the combination of symbiote adaptability and inherited power creating something entirely new. The machine's leg didn't just break, it disintegrated, reduced to scrap metal and sparking components. The robot toppled backward, crashing into an empty building instead of crushing Uraraka. Magnificent, Venom breathed, and for once there was no sarcasm in the mental voice. This is what we were meant to become, but the effort had taken its toll. Izuku could feel his arm burning from channeling so much power, and the symbiote was struggling to repair the damage in real time. He dropped out of the air, barely managing to land without completely face-planting. "Are you okay?" Uraraka was somehow beside him, having apparently freed herself from the debris. She was using her quirk to make him weightless, taking pressure off his injured arm. "I'm fine," Izuku lied, then looked up at the fallen robot. "Are you hurt?" "Just some bruises." "But your arm looks pretty bad." "She is correct," Venom noted. "The integration of powers caused significant tissue damage. We are repairing it, but slowly." Before Izuku could respond, a small, elderly woman appeared beside them. Recovery Girl, Yuei's nurse and one of the most famous healing heroes in Japan. My, she said, looking between Izuku and the destroyed robot. "That was quite a display. But you've injured yourself badly, young man." She leaned in and kissed Izuku's forehead. Immediately, he felt his strength returning as Recovery Girl's quirk accelerated his natural healing process. The symbiote seemed to approve. He could feel Venom studying the healing quirk with intense interest. "Fascinating," the symbiote murmured. "She manipulates the body's natural recovery mechanisms. We could learn from this." "That's an unusual quirk you have there," Recovery Girl continued, eyeing the lingering black tendrils that were still visible around Izuku's injuries. "Some kind of symbiotic enhancement, combined with what appears to be a stockpiling quirk. I've never seen anything quite like it." "It's complicated," Izuku said weakly. "I imagine it is. Well, you'll need to be more careful in the future. Power like that could easily kill you if you're not careful about the integration." "She knows more than she's saying," Venom observed. "But she is not hostile, merely curious." The practical exam ended with the sound of Present Mike's voice echoing across the testing ground. Izuku had managed to destroy several more robots after Recovery Girl's healing, but he was fairly certain he'd spent too much time helping other examinees to rack up a truly competitive score. 43 points, Venom calculated as they walked toward the exit. "Respectable, but not exceptional. We should have focused more on efficient hunting." "We did the right thing," Izuku replied mentally. "Did we? If we fail to gain admission because we prioritized others' safety over our own success, how does that serve the greater good?" It was a fair question, and one Izuku didn't have a good answer for. The results came a week later, delivered by All Might himself via holographic message. Izuku's mother insisted on watching the recording with him, despite his protests that he'd rather receive potentially bad news in private. Young Midoriya, All Might's recorded image beamed at them from the tablet screen. "I'm pleased to inform you that you've been accepted into UA's hero course." Izuku's mother started crying immediately. Izuku just stared at the screen in shock. "Your written exam score was excellent, as expected, but your practical exam results were unique. 43 combat points placed you 7th overall among examinees. However, UA also awards rescue points for acts of heroism during the practical exam." "Rescue points?" Venom seemed as surprised as Izuku. "Your actions in saving multiple fellow examinees, particularly your engagement with the Zero-Point robot, earned you 60 rescue points, the highest total awarded this year. Combined with your combat score, you achieved the highest overall result in this year's entrance exam." The recording continued with additional details about orientation and class assignments, but Izuku wasn't really listening anymore. He'd made it, he was going to UA, he was going to be a real hero. "We are going to be a real hero," Venom corrected gently. "Though I admit, this rescue point system suggests that perhaps your approach to heroism has more merit than I initially believed." That night, Izuku lay in bed and thought about what Recovery Girl had said. She'd recognized that his quirk was more complicated than it appeared, that there were multiple power sources at work. How long before others figured it out? How long before someone started asking questions he couldn't answer? "Does it matter?" Venom asked. "We have achieved our immediate objective. We will attend UA, learn to be heroes, prove ourselves worthy of the trust that has been placed in us. And if they discover what you really are, if they find out I'm harboring an alien parasite," symbiote, Venom corrected with mild offense, "and we prefer to think of it as you providing us with a home in exchange for enhancement and companionship." "Companionship? You were alone before we bonded, isolated, mocked by your peers, dismissed by authority figures. Now you have someone who understands you completely, who shares your experiences, who will never abandon you." Izuku had to admit that was true. For all of Venom's violent tendencies and alien moral compass, the symbiote had been a constant companion through some of the most challenging months of his life. Besides, Venom continued with what sounded like amusement. We suspect that UA will present us with much more interesting challenges than determining whether we deserve admission. The real test begins when we walk through those doors as students. Outside his window, the city sparkled with the lights of 1,000,000 people going about their lives, most of them blissfully unaware that their safety might soon depend on a partnership between a quirkless boy and an alien creature that still occasionally suggested eating criminals. Izuku smiled and closed his eyes. Whatever challenges UA might present, he was ready to face them. They were ready to face them together. The first thing Izuku noticed about his new classroom was how normal it looked. After months of training on a garbage-strewn beach and preparing for an entrance exam that involved giant robots, he'd somehow expected UA's classrooms to be more heroic. Instead, Class 1A looked like any other high school classroom, just with slightly larger desks to accommodate students with physical mutation quirks. The second thing he noticed was Bakugo glaring at him from across the room. The explosive child appears agitated, Venom observed as Izuku took a seat near the middle of the classroom. His stress pheromones are elevated. Izuku tried to ignore both Bakugo's stare and Venom's commentary, focusing instead on his new classmates. They were an eclectic bunch, a girl with pink skin and small horns, a boy with a bird head, someone who appeared to be made entirely of rock, and in the front row, the serious glasses-wearing boy from the entrance exam. "It's you," the gravity girl Uraraka, he remembered, bounded over to his desk with a huge smile. "The one who saved me during the practical. I never got to thank you properly." "She remembers us," Venom noted with what might have been satisfaction. "Good, allies will be valuable in this environment." "It was nothing," Izuku said, feeling his cheeks heat up. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "Are you kidding? You took down that massive robot like it was made of paper." "Your quirk is incredible." Several other students turned to look at him with interest, and Izuku felt his anxiety spike. The last thing he wanted was to become the center of attention on his first day. "What exactly is your quirk?" asked the boy with glasses, Ida, Izuku recalled. During the entrance exam, it appeared to be some form of physical enhancement combined with projectile generation, but the specifics were unclear. "Tell them it's classified," Venom suggested. "Or better yet, demonstrate by using our claws to carve your name into his desk." "It's kind of hard to explain," Izuku said instead. "It's like enhanced physical abilities, with some shape-shifting aspects." Before anyone could ask follow-up questions, the classroom door slid open and their homeroom teacher walked in. Or rather, crawled in, since he appeared to be completely wrapped in what looked like a yellow sleeping bag. "This one is dangerous," Venom said immediately, their mental voice sharp with warning. "Predator, hunter. He moves like someone accustomed to violence." The man Aizawa, according to the nameplate on the desk, stood up and let the sleeping bag fall away, revealing tired eyes and an impressive amount of stubble. When he looked out at the class, his gaze lingered on Izuku for just a fraction of a second longer than the others. "Took you 8 seconds to quiet down," Aizawa said in a monotone voice that somehow managed to be more intimidating than shouting. "That's not going to work. Time is precious. Rational students would understand that." He pulled what looked like a gym uniform out from behind the desk. "Put these on and head outside. We're doing a quirk assessment test." A test. On the first day, Venom seemed intrigued. Interesting. Most educational institutions begin with introductions and administrative nonsense. As they changed into their gym uniforms, Izuku caught fragments of conversations from his classmates. Excitement about finally getting to use their quirks freely, speculation about what the test might involve, complaints about starting with physical activity instead of actual classes. "I heard Aizawa Senshi has expelled entire classes before," whispered a boy with purple hair. "Like, just decided they weren't hero material and kicked them all out." "Excellent," Venom said approvingly. "A teacher who understands that not everyone deserves to be a hero." "That's terrible," Izuku thought back. "What if some of them just needed more time to develop? Then they were not strong enough to deserve the opportunity." Outside, Aizawa led them to what appeared to be a standard athletic field. "You've been taking standardized physical fitness tests most of your lives," he said, producing a small device that looked like it measured distance and speed. "But you've never been allowed to use your quirks. This country's still trying to pretend we're all created equal by not letting those with the most power excel using their natural abilities." He turned to face the class directly. "It's not rational. One day the Ministry of Education will learn." Finally, someone who acknowledges that power creates hierarchy, Venom approved. Aizawa pointed at Bakugo. Bakugo, you managed the most points on the entrance exam. What was your farthest distance throw in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo replied with his usual cocky grin. Right. Try doing it with your quirk this time. Bakugo stepped into the throwing circle, winding up with the softball in his hand. As he released it, he triggered his explosion quirk, the blast propelling the ball far beyond what any normal human could achieve. The device in Aizawa's hand beeped. 705 meters. The class erupted in excited chatter, but Aizawa's expression remained flat. That's what you'll be doing today. 8 physical fitness tests, quirks allowed. Whoever comes in last place across all 8 events will be judged hopeless and expelled. Now the real test begins, Venom said with anticipation. Show them what we can do. The tests were a mix of standard athletic challenges and more specialized assessments. 50-meter dash, grip strength, standing long jump, repeated side steps, ball throw, long distance run, sit-ups, and seated toe touch. For the 50-meter dash, Izuku let Venom enhance his leg muscles and reflexes. He crossed the finish line in 3.04 seconds, not the fastest in the class, but respectably quick. The boy with the engine quirks in his legs had managed an impressive 3.04 seconds, while a girl who could turn invisible had somehow clocked 2.96 seconds. The invisible girl cheated, Venom noted. She removed her clothing to reduce air resistance. Clever. During grip strength, Izuku felt venom flowing through his arm muscles, temporarily restructuring them for maximum power. The device registered 540.3 kilograms, strong, but not as impressive as the boy who appeared to be made of rock, or the girl with what looked like creation-based powers. Each of these children has interesting capabilities, Venom observed as they moved through the tests. The one with the explosions is powerful but lacks finesse. The half-and-half boy has excellent control over dual elements. The invisible girl is more dangerous than she appears. You're analyzing them like threats, Izuku thought. Are they not? We are competing for limited spots in the hero program. Their success diminishes our chances. That's not how it works. We're all going to be heroes together. Naive, but we shall see. The ball throw was where things got interesting. Izuku stepped into the circle, feeling the weight of his classmates' attention. Several of them had already produced impressive results. Uraraka had made her ball float and then released it for infinite distance. Bakugo had blasted his nearly a kilometer. Use both powers, Venom urged. Show them what true strength looks like. Izuku shook his head slightly. One for all was still too unstable, too likely to cause the kind of catastrophic damage that would raise uncomfortable questions. Instead, he reached for Venom alone. The transformation was subtle, just enough enhancement to his arm and shoulder muscles to significantly amplify his throwing power, with a small amount of webbing to provide extra spin and trajectory control. To outside observers, it probably just looked like a physical enhancement quirk. The ball flew 709.6 meters. Acceptable, Venom grudgingly admitted, though we could have done much better. Impressive control, Aizawa commented, making a note on his tablet. Most students with enhancement quirks either go too far or not far enough on their first try. You managed to find the optimal balance. The observation made Izuku nervous. Aizawa was definitely paying more attention to him than to most of the other students. He suspects something, Venom confirmed. His pulse rate increases when he observes us. He knows our quirk is not what it appears to be. During the long-distance run, Izuku found himself pacing alongside a boy with a bird head who introduced himself as Tokoyami. They ran in comfortable silence for most of the event, but toward the end, Tokoyami spoke up. Your quirk, he said quietly, there's something different about it. Something that resonates with mine. He has something living inside him as well, Venom realized. Not like us, but similar. A manifestation of shadow, perhaps. Different how? Izuku asked, trying to keep his breathing steady as they rounded the final turn. Dark, Tokoyami said simply. Most quirks feel like extensions of their users. Yours feels like a partnership. Perceptive, potentially problematic. Before Izuku could respond, they crossed the finish line. The conversation was forgotten as Aizawa called them all together to announce the final results. Right, I'll go in ascending order, he said, consulting his tablet. Hagakure, you're in last place. The invisible girl, Hagakure, apparently made a sound of distress. Several students looked shocked, and Izuku felt his stomach drop. Was Aizawa really going to expel someone on the first day? Oh, by the way, Aizawa continued with what might have been the ghost of a smirk, I was lying about the expulsion. It was just a logical ruse to make sure you gave it your all. Psychological manipulation, Venom noted approvingly, we like this teacher. The relief in the air was palpable, but Izuku noticed that not everyone looked happy about the revelation. Bakugo, in particular, was scowling like someone had personally insulted him. After they changed back into their regular uniforms and returned to the classroom, Izuku found himself surrounded by classmates wanting to know more about his quirk. He deflected as best he could, giving vague answers about physical enhancement and adaptive capabilities while trying not to outright lie. The pink one asks too many questions, Venom commented as a girl named Ashido peppered him with inquiries about his transformation quirk. And the small one with the spheres for hair has impure intentions. Impure intentions? He keeps staring at the female's anatomy. His thoughts are inappropriate. Izuku tried not to think too hard about how Venom might know what Minato was thinking. Lunch was held in a massive cafeteria that looked more like a high-end restaurant than a school dining hall. Izuku found himself at a table with Ida, Uraraka, and Todoroki, the half-and-half boy who'd barely spoken a word all day. So Midoriya, Uraraka said around a bite of katsu, what's your quirk actually called? You never gave it a name during the assessment. Tell her it's called Venom, the symbiote suggested with amusement. See how she reacts. I haven't really decided on a name yet, Izuku said instead. It's still kind of evolving. Evolving quirks are rare, Ida noted, adjusting his glasses. Most quirk manifestations remain relatively static after the initial development period. An evolving quirk suggests either a very powerful base ability or some form of external influence. Too smart for his own good, Venom muttered. Todoroki, who had been quietly eating his soba, suddenly looked up. Your quirk, he said to Izuku, it doesn't feel like the others. What do you mean? Most quirks have a temperature, I suppose. Fire quirks feel warm, ice quirks feel cold, mental quirks feel sharp or soft. Yours feels, he paused, searching for the right word. Hungry, very perceptive. We should eliminate him before he becomes a problem. We should not eliminate him, Izuku thought back, then realized he'd said it out loud when all three of his tablemates stared at him. Eliminate who? Uraraka asked, looking concerned. Nothing, just thinking out loud. Bad habit, smooth recovery, Venom said sarcastically. The afternoon classes were more traditional, modern literature, English, and mathematics. Izuku found himself struggling to concentrate, too aware of Bakugo's constant stare from across the room and Venom's running commentary on their classmates. The engine boy will be useful but inflexible. The round-faced girl has strong moral instincts but lacks killer instinct. The dual-element boy is powerful but emotionally damaged, the explosive child. Him we need to watch carefully. Why Bakugo specifically? He knows something. Every time he looks at us, his stress responses spike. He remembers more about the incident at the research facility than he has admitted. That evening, as Izuku walked home from his first day at UA, he reflected on how different his new classmates were from anyone he'd ever met. They were confident, powerful, already thinking of themselves as heroes, rather than just students who wanted to be heroes. They are children playing at being warriors, Venom observed. Most of them have never faced real danger, real consequences. They do not understand what heroism actually costs. Neither do I, Izuku admitted. Not really, no, but you are learning. And unlike them, you have us to help you understand the darker truths they will eventually have to face. What darker truths? That sometimes, to save innocent lives, heroes must be willing to become monsters. That sometimes, the only way to stop evil is to embrace a small amount of evil yourself. That the line between hero and villain is often thinner than most people want to believe. Izuku thought about that as he climbed the stairs to his apartment. Venom wasn't wrong, there were definitely situations where traditional heroic methods might not be enough. But there had to be ways to handle those situations without compromising your moral foundations. We shall see, Venom said, apparently reading his thoughts. UA will test more than just our physical abilities. It will test everything we believe about heroism, about justice, about the price of protecting others. And when those tests come, we will be ready. Looking back on that first day, Izuku couldn't have imagined how prophetic those words would prove to be. 3 weeks into his time at UA, Izuku had developed what he liked to think of as a routine. Morning classes where he tried to blend in while Venom provided sarcastic commentary on their teachers. Lunch with Ida, Uraraka, and sometimes Todoroki, deflecting increasingly pointed questions about his quirk. Afternoon hero training where he carefully balanced showing competence without revealing the full extent of his abilities. It was a delicate balancing act, and one that was getting harder to maintain as his classmates grew more observant. "Your fighting style is unusual," Todoroki had commented after a particularly intense combat exercise the day before. "Most enhancement quirks create predictable movement patterns. Yours adapts." "He notices too much," Venom had grumbled. "We should discourage his curiosity." "We should be grateful he's not asking more direct questions," Izuku had replied mentally. Now, sitting in the bus on their way to the unforeseen simulation joint for rescue training, Izuku found himself listening to his classmates' chatter about quirks and hero work with a mixture of fondness and anxiety. They were good kids, naive in some ways, but genuinely committed to becoming heroes. The problem was that their definition of heroism might not align with what Venom considered necessary when things got serious. "The small one with the spheres is discussing the female students' anatomies again," Venom noted with distaste. "Perhaps we should remind him that such behavior is inappropriate." "Minata's harmless," Izuku thought back. "Annoying, but harmless." Predators often begin with harmless behavior. Before Izuku could respond to that disturbing observation, the bus came to a stop outside the USJ. The facility was impressive, a massive dome that supposedly contained multiple disaster simulation zones. 13, the space hero, was waiting for them at the entrance, along with. "All Might's not here?" Ida asked, voicing what several students were thinking. "He had some last-minute paperwork to handle," 13 explained. "But don't worry, we'll have plenty to keep you busy." The USJ contains simulation zones for every type of disaster scenario you might encounter as professional heroes. Floods, fires, landslides, urban disasters, we can train for all of it here. "Something is wrong," Venom said suddenly, their mental voice sharp with alarm. "What do you mean?" Izuku asked as they followed 13 into the facility. "Sense. At least 30 individuals who do not belong here. Elevated stress hormones, weapon oil, fear." Izuku's blood went cold. "Are you sure? We are hunters, remember. We know the smell of predators." That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing the central plaza of the USJ in an eerie red glow. In the middle of the space, what looked like a portal made of swirling black mist had opened up, and figures were stepping through it. Lots of figures. 13, Aizawa's voice cracked like a whip. "Get the students out of here. These are real villains," finally Venom said, and there was hungry anticipation in the mental voice. "Real threats, real prey." "Students, stay back," 13 shouted, but several of Class 1A had already moved toward the railing to get a better look at what was happening below. Izuku watched in fascination and growing horror as dozens of villains poured through the portal. They looked like extras from a nightmare, people with grotesque mutation quirks, others carrying weapons that were definitely not legal, all of them moving with the kind of coordinated purpose that suggested serious planning. In the center of the group stood a figure that made Izuku's skin crawl. Pale, thin, with hands covering his face and arms like some kind of twisted fashion statement. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the facility. "Where is he?" the figure asked, sounding almost petulant. "We came here to kill All Might, but he's not here. How disappointing." The leader, Venom, identified. "Unstable, dangerous. We should eliminate him first." "We should get out of here," Izuku thought back, but he was already moving toward the stairs. Not to escape, to get a better view of the situation. "I suppose we'll just have to make do with his students," the pale villain continued. "Though I have to say, I'm curious about one of them in particular." He turned to look directly up at the observation area where Class 1A was standing. When his eyes found Izuku, they stayed there. "The one with the interesting quirk," he said, and his voice carried a note of genuine fascination. "The one that feels so, different from the others." He knows, Venom realized. Somehow, he knows we are not what we appear to be. Down in the plaza, Aizawa was already in motion. Izuku watched in awe as their homeroom teacher's capture weapon lashed out, wrapping around multiple villains while his erasure quirk shut down their abilities. But there were too many of them, and more kept pouring through the portal. "Students!" 13 was trying to herd them toward the exit, but the villains had anticipated that. The Black Mist, apparently a villain himself, materialized between Class 1A and the door. "I'm afraid I cannot allow you to leave," the Mist said in a cultured voice that was somehow more terrifying than outright threats. "Shigaraki has taken such an interest in meeting all of you." Shigaraki, the pale one. "And this Mist creature is a teleporter," Venom analyzed quickly. "Coordinated attack, professional execution. They came here specifically for the students." "Everyone stay together," Ida shouted, but it was too late. The mist villain was expanding, creating portals that began to swallow students. Izuku felt the familiar sensation of being pulled through space, and then he was falling through empty air above what looked like a flooded zone. Below him, he could see villains in the water waiting to attack whoever appeared. "Water-based ambush," Venom noted. "They expect us to be helpless in the water." "They're about to be very disappointed," Izuku muttered, and let the transformation begin. He hit the water in full symbiote form, black tendrils streaming from his body as he moved through the liquid with inhuman grace. The villains had been expecting a panicked student. Instead, they got something that moved through their element like it belonged there. "These are not heroes," Venom said as they approached the first group of villains. "They came here to kill children. We are justified in using lethal force." "No killing," Izuku insisted, even as he struck the first villain with enough force to send him flying out of the water. "We incapacitate and restrain. Your mercy will get innocent people killed. My mercy is what makes me a hero instead of a monster." But as the fight continued, Izuku found his resolve being tested. These weren't desperate criminals or misguided thugs. They were here specifically to murder teenagers. Every villain he fought made it clear that they had no intention of showing mercy to his classmates. "The large one with the shark mutation," Venom warned. "He's moving toward the shallow end where that pink girl landed." Izuku turned to see Ashido fighting for her life against 3 villains while a massive shark man circled toward her from behind. She was holding her own, but she couldn't see the flanking attack coming. "Now will you let us do what is necessary?" Venom asked. This time, Izuku didn't argue. The transformation was complete this time, not just enhanced strength and speed, but the full alien form that had terrified those thugs weeks ago. When Izuku Venom erupted from the water, moving faster than human eyes could follow, the effect on the villains was immediate and gratifying. "What the hell is that thing?" one of them screamed. "We are your worst nightmare," Venom replied through Izuku's mouth, their voice carrying harmonics that made human teeth ache. The Sharkman turned just in time to see a wall of black tendrils heading directly for him. Instead of claws or punches, Venom wrapped him in webbing and slammed him into the concrete wall hard enough to leave cracks. Not lethal, but definitely incapacitating. Efficient, Venom approved. Though we still believe a more permanent solution would be preferable. The remaining villains in the flood zone found themselves facing something they hadn't trained for, a creature that moved through water like a natural predator, that could restrain multiple opponents simultaneously, and that seemed to anticipate their attacks before they made them. Within minutes, the zone was clear. Ashido stared at Izuku's symbiote form with wide eyes. "Midoriya," she asked tentatively. "Is that really you?" The black substance flowed back into his body, revealing his normal appearance. "Yeah, it's me. Are you hurt?" "Just some bruises, but your quirk, that was incredible and kind of terrifying." "She fears us," Venom noted, "but also respects our power," a reasonable response. Before Izuku could respond, an explosion echoed through the facility. Through the windows, he could see what looked like a massive bird-like creature fighting with Aizawa in the central plaza. "Artificial," Venom said immediately upon seeing the creature. "Bioengineered, designed for combat against multiple opponents." "We need to help Aizawa-senshi," Izuku said. "Are you crazy?" Ashido grabbed his arm. "That thing is massive, it'll kill us." She is not wrong. The artificial creature has multiple quirks: strength enhancement, shock absorption, regeneration. It was designed to fight someone like All Might. But even as Venom provided the analysis, Izuku was already moving. He couldn't just stand by and watch his teacher get torn apart by some kind of bioweapon. The journey through the facility to reach the central plaza was harrowing. Izuku caught glimpses of his classmates fighting in other zones, Todoroki freezing an entire area, Bakugo exploding everything in sight, Tokoyami's dark shadow rampaging through a group of villains. They were all holding their own, but barely. "They are stronger than we initially assessed," Venom admitted grudgingly. "Perhaps they are worthy of being called heroes after all." When Izuku reached the central plaza, the situation was worse than he'd feared. Aizawa was down, his capture weapon torn and bloody, facing off against the bird-like creature. Namu, he heard Shigaraki call it, with obvious injuries. "Senshi," Izuku shouted, launching himself into the fight without thinking. Finally, Venom said with satisfaction, "A real challenge," but the Namu was unlike anything they'd faced before. It moved with inhuman speed despite its size, shrugging off attacks that should have sent it flying. When Izuku tried to web it down, the creature simply flexed and tore through the restraints like they were made of paper. It has shock absorption, Venom realized. Our physical attacks are being negated. We need a different approach. What do you suggest? Use both powers, combine our abilities with the inherited quirk, overwhelm its absorption capacity. Izuku hesitated. The combination of One for All and Venom was still unstable, still likely to cause the kind of damage that would be hard to explain. But Aizawa was hurt, the Namu was turning toward where other students were starting to arrive, and Shigaraki was watching the whole thing with obvious delight. Do it, Venom urged. Show them what we really are. Green lightning crackled around Izuku's body as One for All surged through his system. At the same time, black tendrils erupted from his skin, but now they were wreathed in the distinctive energy of the inherited quirk. When he struck the Namu, the impact was tremendous, enough to actually stagger the bioweapon and crack the floor beneath its feet. But the effort took its toll. Izuku could feel his bones creaking under the strain, and Venom was struggling to repair the damage in real time. More, the symbiote urged. We can take more. End this creature before it hurts the others. And for a moment, Izuku wanted to. The rage was building in him, not just his own anger at seeing his teacher hurt, but Venom's alien fury at being denied the hunt, the kill, the final victory. It would be so easy to just let go, to stop holding back, to show everyone what he was really capable of. The Namu raised one massive fist to crush Aizawa, who was trying to crawl away with what looked like a broken arm. Izuku reached deeper into both power sources than he'd ever gone before. The explosion of force that followed was visible from orbit. When the dust cleared, the Namu was embedded in the far wall of the facility, motionless. Izuku was standing in a crater, black tendrils still wreathed in green lightning, his eyes reflecting a predatory intelligence that was definitely not entirely human. Magnificent, Venom purred. Now they understand what we are capable of. Around the plaza, his classmates were staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Even Bakugo looked shaken by the display of raw power. But it was Shigaraki's reaction that worried Izuku the most. The pale villain was clapping slowly, his visible eye gleaming with something that looked like hunger. Incredible, Shigaraki said. I knew there was something special about you, but this is beyond what I expected. That level of power, that willingness to embrace violence when necessary, you'd make an excellent villain. He is not entirely wrong, Venom observed. What we just did was not heroic, it was dominance through superior force. I'm not a villain, Izuku said, but his voice carried harmonics that belonged to Venom. I'm going to be a hero. Are you sure about that? Shigaraki tilted his head. Because that quirk of yours, it doesn't feel very heroic, it feels hungry, predatory. Like something that enjoys causing pain. Before Izuku could respond, the entrance doors to the USJ exploded inward. All Might stood silhouetted in the doorway, and his expression when he saw the scene before him was unlike anything Izuku had ever seen from the symbol of peace. There was anger there, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like fear. He sees what we have become, Venom realized, and he is afraid of us. I am here, All Might roared, but his eyes never left Izuku's transformed face. And it looks like I have a lot of explaining to do. The fight that followed was brief and decisive. All Might dispatched the remaining villains with efficiency that bordered on ruthless, while Shigaraki and the Mist villain retreated through another portal, promising that this was just the beginning. As the dust settled and the authorities arrived, Izuku found himself struggling to return to his normal form. The combination of powers was still surging through his system, and Venom seemed reluctant to fully retreat. They all fear us now, the symbiote noted with what might have been satisfaction, even the ones who call us friend. Looking around at his classmates' faces, Izuku realized Venom was right. They were looking at him differently now, not like a fellow student, but like something dangerous that they weren't sure they could trust. And maybe, just maybe, they were right to be afraid. 2 weeks after USJ, Izuku still woke up with nightmares. Not about the villains, though Shigaraki's pale face and hungry smile certainly featured in some of the dreams. Not about the Namu either, despite the fact that the bioweapon had nearly killed him and Aizawa. No, the nightmares were about the moment when he'd combined One for All with Venom's power and felt something dark and satisfied unfurl in his chest as the creature hit the wall. The nightmares were about how good it had felt. You are dwelling on irrelevant concerns, Venom said as Izuku stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. We protected our allies. We neutralized a significant threat. These are positive outcomes. By using enough force to potentially kill that thing, Izuku muttered, running water over his face. That's not what heroes do. That is precisely what heroes do when faced with creatures designed to murder children. It was an argument they'd been having for days now, ever since the incident report had been filed and the media had gotten hold of footage from the USJS security cameras. The news outlets couldn't decide whether to call him a hero or a potential threat. Grainy video of his combined transformation had been analyzed frame by frame, with Quirk experts debating whether any 15-year-old should have access to that level of destructive power. Mystery students Quirk raises questions, one headline had read. New type of enhancement Quirk or something more dangerous? Let them speculate, Venom had said. Fear can be a useful tool. Fear is not what heroes inspire, Izuku had replied, but even he wasn't entirely convinced anymore. The worst part was how his classmates had been treating him since returning to school, not badly exactly, but differently. Conversations would quiet when he entered a room. People were more careful around him, more polite. Even Uraraka, who had been so friendly before, seemed to choose her words more carefully when they talked. Only Bakugo seemed unchanged, but that was because he'd always looked at Izuku with suspicion and anger. If anything, he seemed almost vindicated by the recent developments. I knew there was something wrong with you, Bakugo had cornered him after hero training the day before. That quirk of yours isn't natural. I saw what happened at the research facility, and now everyone else has seen what you really are. We should silence him, Venom had suggested. His accusations could become problematic. What am I, Kachan? Izuku had asked instead, genuinely curious about Bakugo's theory. I don't know, Bakugo had admitted, and for once there was something other than anger in his voice. Something that might have been fear. But whatever it is, it's not human. Now, sitting in homeroom and listening to Aizawa explain the upcoming UA Sports Festival, Izuku tried to focus on the present instead of dwelling on uncomfortable truths. The sports festival is your chance to show the world what you're capable of, their teacher was saying, his arms still in a sling from the USJ incident. Pro-heroes, agencies, and media outlets will all be watching. For many of you, this will be your first real opportunity to make an impression on potential mentors and future employers. An exhibition, Venom noted with interest. They want us to perform for an audience. Think of it as a massive job fair, Aizawa continued, except the jobs involve risking your life to protect others, and your resume is how well you can fight. Several students raised their hands with questions about the format, the rules, the judging criteria. Izuku barely listened. He was too busy worrying about what would happen when he had to use his quirk on live television in front of millions of people. This is an opportunity, Venom said. A chance to show them what we are truly capable of. That's what I'm afraid of, Izuku thought back. What if I lose control again? What if you take over during a match? We are partners. We do not take over. We work together toward common goals. And what if our goals don't align during the festival? Venom was quiet for a moment. Then we will discuss the matter at the time. That wasn't particularly reassuring. The weeks leading up to the sports festival were intense. Every student in Class 1A seemed to be training constantly, pushing their quirks to new limits and developing new techniques. The atmosphere was competitive but friendly, at least it was for everyone else. Izuku found himself increasingly isolated. His classmates weren't hostile, but there was a wariness in their interactions with him now that hadn't been there before USJ. They'd seen what his quirk could do when he stopped holding back, and it had made them realize that they didn't really understand what they were dealing with. They fear our power, Venom observed during lunch, watching as their usual table partners found reasons to sit elsewhere. Good fear breeds respect. Fear breeds mistrust, Izuku corrected. Heroes don't want to work with someone they're afraid of. Then they are weak heroes who deserve to fail. The only person who seemed genuinely unaffected by the change in Izuku's status was Todoroki. If anything, the dual-element user seemed more interested in Izuku now than he had been before. Your quirk, Todoroki said one day after training, approaching Izuku while he was cleaning up. It's not just enhancement, is it? Dangerous question, Venom warned. What makes you say that? Izuku asked carefully. The way it moves, enhancement quirks boost existing capabilities. They make you faster, stronger, more durable. But yours, it changes you, physically and mentally. During the USJ incident, for a few moments, you weren't entirely yourself. Izuku's blood went cold. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Todoroki's heterochromic eyes were unnervingly perceptive. There's something else sharing space in your head, isn't there? Something that influences your decisions, your reactions. He knows too much. We should eliminate him. Stop suggesting we kill my classmates, Izuku snapped, then immediately looked around to make sure no one had overheard. Todoroki raised an eyebrow. I didn't suggest killing anyone. Smooth, Venom commented dryly. Sorry, Izuku said, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. I was thinking about something else. Or someone else was thinking for you. Todoroki studied his face intently. I know what it's like to have power that comes with complications. My fire sighed. It's not just about temperature control. There's something else there, something that wants to burn everything down sometimes. Maybe we have more in common than you think. Before Izuku could respond, Todoroki walked away, leaving him standing alone in the training room with the uncomfortable realization that he wasn't the only one struggling with the darker aspects of his quirk. The sports festival itself was a spectacle unlike anything Izuku had ever experienced. The stadium was packed with thousands of spectators, cameras were everywhere, and the energy in the air was almost electric with excitement and anticipation. Welcome to the UA Sports Festival, President Mike's voice boomed across the arena. Today, we'll see the next generation of heroes compete in challenges designed to test every aspect of their capabilities. So many watching eyes, Venom noted as they walked onto the field with the rest of Class 1A. This would be an excellent opportunity to send a message to potential enemies. What kind of message? That we are not to be underestimated. The first event was an obstacle course that wound its way around and through the entire stadium complex. Students had to navigate robot sentries, cross a massive chasm, and make their way through a minefield while competing for the fastest times. Simple enough, Venom said as they lined up at the starting line. Enhanced speed and agility should be sufficient. But as the starting signal echoed across the stadium and hundreds of students surged forward, Izuku realized the event was going to be more complicated than either he or Venom had anticipated. The initial bottleneck at the first obstacle was chaos. Students with every conceivable type of quirk all trying to force their way through a narrow passage, while robot sentries attacked from multiple angles. Izuku found himself pressed against other competitors, unable to use his enhanced speed effectively in the crowd. We need elevation, Venom observed, above the crowd, away from the congestion. Izuku let the symbiote flow partially out from his body, forming tendrils that latched onto the walls and ceiling of the passage. To the cameras and spectators, it probably looked like some kind of web-slinging quirk, which wasn't entirely inaccurate. Moving along the ceiling while other students fought through the crowd below, Izuku made good time through the first section. But it was the second obstacle, the massive chasm that had to be crossed via tightropes and floating platforms, where Venom's suggestions became more problematic. We could simply leap across, the symbiote said as they watched other students carefully making their way across the precarious crossing points. Our enhanced leg strength would be sufficient. That's like a 100-meter jump, Izuku pointed out. People will start asking questions if I do something that's physically impossible for a normal enhancement quirk. Then we make it look possible. Use the tendrils for mid-air course correction. Make it appear as though we are web-swinging rather than jumping. It was actually a clever plan. Izuku positioned himself at the edge of the chasm, let Venom enhance his leg muscles beyond anything he'd done publicly before, and launched himself into space. To observers, it looked like he was using projectile webbing to swing across the gap in a series of acrobatic moves. In reality, the symbiote was doing most of the work, adjusting his trajectory and providing additional thrust when needed. He landed on the far side of the chasm in third place, behind Todoroki and Bakugo. Acceptable positioning, Venom noted. We are close enough to the leaders to make a move in the final section. The minefield was where things got interesting. Bakugo was in the lead, using his explosion quirk to clear safe paths through the buried charges. Todoroki was close behind, freezing sections of the field to safely identify and avoid the mines. Other students were picking their way carefully through the obstacles, some following in the paths cleared by the leaders. We should take a different approach, Venom suggested. Use the mines to our advantage. How? Instead of answering directly, Venom guided Izuku toward a section of the minefield that other students were avoiding. An area dense with buried charges that would be dangerous for anyone trying to move through carefully. Enhanced durability, Venom explained as they approached the dangerous zone. We trigger the mines deliberately, use the explosions for propulsion. That's insane. That is why it will work. Against his better judgment, Izuku let Venom take more control over his body's defensive systems. The symbiote flowed across his skin, forming a protective layer that could absorb and distribute impact force. Then, instead of trying to avoid the mines, he began deliberately setting them off. The first explosion lifted him 10 feet into the air and sent him flying forward over a section of the field that other students were still carefully navigating. The second and third explosions, triggered by landing in just the right spots, created a chain reaction that launched him even further. To the spectators, it looked like the most reckless, insane strategy anyone had ever attempted in a sports festival event. To Venom, it was just creative use of available resources. Izuku crossed the finish line in first place, smoking slightly and grinning despite himself. Efficient, Venom approved, and sufficiently dramatic for the watching audience. "That was incredible," Present Mike's voice boomed across the stadium. "Midoriya from Class 1A just used the minefield as a propulsion system. I've never seen anything like it." In the stands, Izuku could see pro heroes taking notes and pointing in his direction. Some looked impressed, others looked concerned. A few looked genuinely disturbed by what they'd just witnessed. "Mission accomplished," Venom said with satisfaction. "They now understand that we are not bound by conventional limitations." The second event was a cavalry battle, teams of 4 students competing to capture headbands worth different point values, with the first-place finisher from the obstacle course automatically receiving 10 million points and becoming everyone's primary target. "Great," Izuku muttered as he found himself wearing the 10 million point headband. "Now everyone's going to be hunting us. Excellent. We prefer being the predator, but sometimes being the prey can be equally educational." Finding teammates proved challenging. Most students were either already committed to other teams or were hesitant to partner with someone who had such a massive target on his head. Izuku ended up with Uraraka, Tokoyami, and Hatsume, a combination that was unconventional but potentially effective. The Gravity Girl provides mobility options, Venom analyzed as they prepared for the battle. The Shadow User offers offensive capabilities that complement our own. The Inventor has support gear that could be useful. It is a functional team composition. The cavalry battle was chaos from the moment it began. Every other team in the arena immediately focused on capturing Izuku's headband, creating a massive free-for-all with him at the center. "This is what we were made for," Venom said with obvious delight as they fought off multiple attacking teams simultaneously. Combat against overwhelming odds, the thrill of the hunt. But as the battle progressed, Izuku began to notice that Venom's influence on his decision-making was becoming stronger. When Monoma from Class 1B tried to copy his quirk and found himself overwhelmed by alien sensations, Izuku felt a surge of vicious satisfaction that definitely didn't belong to him. "He tried to steal what is ours," Venom explained when Izuku questioned the reaction. "He deserved to suffer for his presumption. He's just a competitor. He doesn't deserve to be hurt. Everyone who opposes us deserves whatever happens to them." The final minutes of the cavalry battle were a blur of movement and combat. Teams were forming temporary alliances, breaking apart, reforming in different configurations. Izuku's team managed to hold onto their high-value headband through a combination of Uraraka's gravity manipulation, Tokoyami's dark shadow attacks, and increasingly aggressive tactics from Izuku himself. When the time ran out, they'd managed to secure first place, but Izuku could see the concerned looks from his teammates, particularly from Tokoyami, who seemed to understand better than the others what it meant to have a quirk with its own agenda. "Your shadow," Tokoyami said quietly as they prepared for the final event. "It's getting stronger, isn't it? More assertive." "He knows," Venom observed. "His own darkness recognizes ours." "Sometimes," Izuku admitted. "It has opinions about how things should be handled." "Mine too. Be careful. When we let the darkness make too many decisions for us, we risk losing ourselves to it." The final event was a tournament bracket, one-on-one matches to determine the overall winner of the sports festival. Izuku's first opponent was Hitoshi Shinso from General Studies, a purple-haired boy with a brainwashing quirk. Mental manipulation, Venom identified immediately. Dangerous. We should not allow him to speak. "I can't just attack him without warning. That's not how tournament fights work. Then we end this quickly, before he can establish control." The match began with Shinso trying to provoke Izuku into responding verbally. Apparently his brainwashing quirk required verbal interaction to activate. But before Izuku could fall for the trap, Venom took direct action. The symbiote surged through Izuku's nervous system, overwhelming his conscious control and launching him directly at Shinso with inhuman speed. The attack was so fast and unexpected that the General Studies student didn't have time to activate his quirk before he was webbed to the arena floor. "Winner, Midoriya," Midnight announced, but her voice carried a note of concern. "Efficient," Venom said with satisfaction, "though perhaps we were more obvious than intended." In the audience, Izuku could see people talking animatedly, pointing at him, making notes. Some of the pro heroes looked genuinely disturbed by what they'd just witnessed, a student whose quirk had apparently acted independently of his conscious will. They begin to understand, Venom noted approvingly. We are not bound by the same limitations as purely human quirks. Izuku's subsequent matches followed a similar pattern. Each opponent presented a different type of challenge, and each time Venom provided increasingly aggressive solutions. Against Ida, the symbiote predicted his movement patterns and set traps with webbing. Against Todoroki, it absorbed and redistributed the thermal energy from his ice attacks while pushing Izuku to be more ruthless in his counterattacks. "You are becoming what you were meant to be," Venom said during the brief rest period before the final match. "A perfect fusion of human determination and our capabilities." "I'm becoming something that scares people," Izuku replied, looking up at the stands where he could see his mother's worried face among the spectators. Fear is not always negative. Sometimes fear is the beginning of respect. The final match was against Bakugo. Of course it was. Standing across the arena from his childhood friend turned tormentor, Izuku felt a complex mix of emotions that had nothing to do with Venom's influence. This was personal in ways that went far beyond quirks and competition. "I knew it would come down to this," Bakugo said as they faced off in the center of the arena. "You and me, just like when we were kids. Except this time, I'm going to prove once and for all that you're still just a useless Deku who doesn't belong in the hero world." "He seeks to humiliate us," Venom observed, and there was dangerous anger in the mental voice. "To reduce us to the frightened child we once were. This cannot be allowed." "It's not about humiliation," Izuku said, but he could feel his own anger rising to match the symbiote's. "It's about proving that I deserve to be here. Then let us prove it in a way he will never forget." The match began with Bakugo launching himself forward in a barrage of explosive attacks, trying to overwhelm Izuku with raw aggression. But Venom had been studying Bakugo's fighting style for months, analyzing every move, every tendency, every weakness. "He relies too heavily on his explosions," the symbiote noted as they flowed around another blast. "He has become predictable, arrogant." Instead of trying to match Bakugo's explosions with raw force, Izuku let Venom guide his movements in a way that was calculated to frustrate and unbalance his opponent. Every attack was dodged by just enough, every counterattack targeted Bakugo's weak points with surgical precision. "We are toying with him," Venom said with satisfaction, "demonstrating our superiority." "We're fighting strategically," Izuku corrected. But even he had to admit there was something deeply satisfying about finally having the upper hand against someone who had tormented him for years. The turning point came when Bakugo, frustrated by his inability to land a solid hit, overcommitted to a massive explosion that left him temporarily vulnerable. Venom seized the opportunity, flowing across Izuku's body in a partial transformation that enhanced his speed and strength beyond anything he'd shown publicly before. When Izuku struck Bakugo, the impact sent his opponent flying across the arena and into the wall with enough force to crack the concrete. "Decisive," Venom approved. "Now finish him." But as Izuku approached the stunned Bakugo, ready to end the match, something in his opponent's expression gave him pause. It wasn't just pain or defeat, it was genuine fear. For the first time in their lives, Bakugo was genuinely afraid of him. "He should be," Venom said. "He has spent years tormenting us. Now he understands the consequences of his actions." Izuku stopped moving toward his opponent, suddenly seeing the situation from an outside perspective. Bakugo was hurt, possibly seriously, and he was standing over him with what probably looked like predatory intent. This wasn't heroic, this was something else entirely. "I forfeit," Izuku said, stepping back from Bakugo. "What?" Venom's mental voice was sharp with disbelief. "We have won. Why are you stopping?" "Because this isn't what heroes do," Izuku said, and despite Venom's protests, he walked away from the arena floor. The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted in confused chatter. Nobody understood why the apparent winner had just forfeited a match he was clearly dominating. In the stands, All Might was staring at him with an expression that was part pride, part concern, and part something that looked like fear. "You have made a mistake," Venom said as they left the arena. "They will interpret this as weakness." "Maybe," Izuku agreed, "but I'd rather be seen as weak than become something I'm not proud of. And what if being something you're not proud of is what it takes to save innocent lives?" Izuku didn't have a good answer for that question. and as the festival concluded around them, he realized that his partnership with Venom was entering a new and potentially more dangerous phase. The symbiote was no longer content to simply enhance his abilities. It wanted to reshape his approach to heroism itself. And sometimes, in his darkest moments, Izuku wasn't entirely sure that would be a bad thing. The internship with Gran Torino was supposed to be about learning to control One for All. Instead, Izuku found himself spending most of his time getting thrown around a small apartment by a 90-year-old man who moved like a caffeinated pinball and hit like a freight train. "Your problem," Gran Torino said, after sending Izuku crashing into the wall for the 15th time that afternoon, "is that you're trying to use two completely different power sources like they're the same thing." Finally, someone who understands, Venom commented as Izuku peeled himself off the floor. "This old human has more insight than most. One for All is raw power," Gran Torino continued, not bothering to help Izuku up. "It wants to explode outward to overwhelm obstacles through sheer force. But your other quirk, whatever it really is, works through finesse and adaptation." "So how do I make them work together?" Izuku asked, rubbing his ribs where he'd hit the wall. "You don't, not yet anyway. First you learn to use each power source independently, then you worry about integration. Right now, you're like someone trying to write poetry while solving calculus problems. You're going to fail at both." It was frustrating advice, but Izuku had to admit it made sense. Every time he tried to combine One for All with Venom's abilities, the result was either unstable or overwhelming. Maybe he needed to take a step back, learn to master each power individually. "The old man speaks wisdom," Venom agreed. "We have been trying to force compatibility instead of developing natural synergy." That evening, as Izuku practiced using One for All in controlled bursts while keeping Venom's influence to a minimum, his phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "Hero killer spotted in Hosu City. All heroes in the area respond immediately." "The hero killer," Venom said, and there was something like anticipation in the mental voice. "We have heard much about this one." "You sound almost excited," Izuku noted, pausing in his training. "He is a predator who hunts those he deems unworthy. There is elegance in his approach." Before Izuku could respond to that disturbing observation, Gran Torino burst through the apartment door in full costume. "Emergency call," the old hero said. "The hero killer's been spotted and every available hero is being mobilized. You're coming with me, consider this part of your training." The flight to Hosu City was surreal. Izuku had never seen so many pro-heroes mobilized at once, and the atmosphere was tense in a way that suggested this was personal for a lot of them. The hero killer hadn't just been murdering random heroes, he'd been targeting specific individuals, and his criteria for selection was still a mystery to most people. "Not a mystery to us," Venom said as they landed in the city center. "We have observed his pattern. He kills those he considers false heroes, the ones who seek fame and fortune rather than true justice." "How could you possibly know that?" Izuku asked mentally. "We pay attention to his choices. The heroes he has killed were all flawed in obvious ways, corrupt, fame-seeking, incompetent. He is a predator, but he is also a moral enforcer." That was a deeply disturbing way to think about a serial killer. But before Izuku could argue the point, Gran Torino was directing him toward a section of the city where smoke was rising from multiple buildings. "Stay close," the old hero instructed. "The hero killer's not just dangerous because of his quirk, he's smart, experienced, and he knows how to use the environment to his advantage." The destruction in the area was extensive but oddly targeted. Several buildings showed signs of combat, but the damage seemed to be focused on specific locations rather than random violence. Whatever had happened here, it had been methodical. Professional, Venom noted approvingly. He does not waste effort on unnecessary destruction. They found the first body 3 blocks from their landing point. Izuku had never seen a dead hero before. The man was lying in an alley, his costume torn and bloody, his eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. There were multiple blade wounds across his torso, precise cuts that had been calculated to cause maximum damage in minimum time. "Efficient," Venom observed clinically. The killer knew exactly where to strike for quick incapacitation and death. "This is horrible," Izuku whispered, fighting down nausea. "This is justice," Venom corrected. "Look at his costume, his equipment. Expensive materials, flashy design, minimal practical functionality. He was a hero for the wrong reasons." "That doesn't mean he deserved to die, doesn't it? How many people might have died because he was more concerned with his image than with actual heroic work?" The argument was interrupted by the sound of combat from a nearby street. Gran Torino immediately headed toward the noise, with Izuku reluctantly following. As they got closer, the sounds became more distinct, the clash of metal on metal, explosions, someone shouting in pain. Multiple combatants Venom analyzed, at least 3 different fighting styles, and something familiar. They rounded the corner to find a scene that made Izuku's heart stop. Ida was on the ground, apparently paralyzed, while a figure in dark armor stood over him with blood-stained blades. The hero killer Stain was methodically preparing to finish off his victim. But before Izuku could move to help, another figure dropped from the rooftops. Todoroki landed between Stain and Ida, ice already forming around his left hand. 2 more heroes, Stain said, and his voice carried an odd note of disappointment. I was hoping the famous Ingenium's little brother would provide more of a challenge before I sent him to join his predecessor. Ingenium's brother, Venom realized. This is personal for the engine boy. Revenge, not justice. Izuku's mind raced as he processed the situation. Ida wasn't here as part of the official hero response. He'd come to Hosu specifically to confront his brother's attacker. This was a vendetta, not a heroic rescue. Interesting, Venom mused. The engine boy has embraced his darker impulses. Perhaps there is hope for him yet. Ida, Todoroki called out, sending a wave of ice toward Stain that the hero killer dodged with inhuman agility. What are you doing here? He killed my brother, Ida replied, and his voice was thick with hatred. I came here to make him pay. Stain laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the alley walls. Another fake hero seeking personal satisfaction instead of true justice. You're no different from the rest of them. He is not wrong, Venom observed. The engine boy is here for revenge, not to protect innocence. His motivations are selfish. As the 3-way battle began in earnest, Izuku found himself frozen with indecision. Every instinct told him to help his classmates, but Venom's commentary was raising uncomfortable questions about the nature of the conflict he was witnessing. Observe, the symbiote suggested. Learn, this is what happens when heroes act on personal impulses rather than rational judgment. Todoroki was fighting defensively, trying to protect the paralyzed Ida while keeping Stain at a distance with ice attacks. But the hero killer was too fast, too experienced. He flowed around the ice like it wasn't there, his blades finding gaps in Todoroki's defenses with disturbing ease. You fight well, Stain acknowledged as he pressed his attack. Better than most of the posers I've encountered, but you're still just children playing at being heroes. He speaks truth, Venom said as Todoroki barely avoided a blade thrust that would have opened his throat. They are not ready for this level of combat. Then I have to help them, Izuku said, starting forward. Do you? Look at what is actually happening here. Izuku paused, really observing the fight for the first time. Stain wasn't trying to kill Todoroki, not immediately anyway. He was testing him, pushing him, forcing him to fight beyond his normal capabilities. And when Ida had tried to interfere earlier, driven by rage and desire for revenge, Stain had easily disabled him without delivering a killing blow. He is teaching them, Venom realized. Through combat, through pressure, through the threat of death, he is showing them what real heroism requires. By murdering people, by eliminating those who corrupt the concept of heroism through their selfishness and incompetence. The argument was interrupted by a change in the battle's tempo. Todoroki had overextended himself with a particularly large ice attack, and Stain had seized the opening. Before Todoroki could react, the hero killer was inside his guard, blade aimed at his heart. Izuku moved without thinking. The transformation was partial, just enough enhancement to cross the distance in time to intercept Stain's attack. But as his reinforced arm blocked the blade, he found himself face to face with the hero killer for the first time. Stain's eyes were unlike anything Izuku had ever seen. Not the wild madness he'd expected from a serial killer, but cold intelligence mixed with something that might have been genuine moral conviction. Interesting, Stain said, studying Izuku's partially transformed arm. Another student hero, but this one feels different. He recognizes us, Venom noted with something like approval. He can sense that we are not like the others. Your quirk, Stain continued, seeming genuinely curious despite the fact that they were locked in combat. It's not natural, is it? There's something else there, something that understands what real strength requires. Before Izuku could respond, Stain disengaged from their blade lock and backflipped away, landing in a crouch several meters back. Tell me, young hero, the hero killer said, what do you think of the current state of hero society? It was such an unexpected question that Izuku almost laughed. They were in the middle of a life-or-death fight, and Stain wanted to have a philosophical discussion. Answer him, Venom urged. This is important. I think there are problems, Izuku said carefully. Heroes who care more about fame than helping people. Heroes who are in it for the money or the status. But that doesn't mean all heroes are corrupt. Doesn't it? Stain's voice carried genuine curiosity. When the system rewards selfishness and punishes true heroic ideals, when fame and fortune matter more than protecting the innocent, what is the difference between heroes and villains except the color of their costumes? He asks the questions we have been wondering about, Venom said quietly. The questions your hero-killer friend All Might refuses to address. Some heroes are genuine, Izuku insisted. All Might, for example, he's dedicated his life to protecting people. All Might, Stain repeated, and for the first time there was something like respect in his voice. Yes, he is one of the few genuine heroes left. But look around, how many others can you name who measure up to his standard? Izuku opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because the truth was, he couldn't think of many. Most of the pro-heroes he'd met were focused on their rankings, their public image, their agency profits. Even some of the teachers at UA seemed more concerned with producing successful graduates than actually developing moral heroes. He sees the same corruption we have observed, Venom noted, the same fundamental problems with this society's approach to heroism. But murder isn't the answer, Izuku said. You can't fix a broken system by killing people. Can't you? Stain asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. When the system protects those who abuse their power, when legal methods fail to remove corrupt heroes from positions of authority, what alternatives remain? Violence, Venom answered before Izuku could respond. Sometimes violence is the only language that those in power understand. There has to be another way, Izuku insisted, but even as he said it, he could hear the doubt in his own voice. Perhaps, Stain acknowledged. But until someone finds that other way, I will continue to remove the poison from the well. Heroes who seek only personal gain, who put their own interests above protecting the innocent, who corrupt the very concept of heroism through their selfishness, they do not deserve to live. The hero killer's attention shifted to Ida, who was still paralyzed on the ground but clearly listening to every word. Like this one, Stain continued. He came here not to protect innocence, not to uphold justice, but to satisfy his personal desire for revenge. He cares nothing for heroism, only for his own emotional needs. Truth, Venom agreed. The engine boy's motivations are entirely selfish. That doesn't mean he deserves to die, Izuku said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Doesn't it? How many people will suffer because he wastes time and resources on personal vendettas instead of true heroic work? How many innocents will die because he chooses revenge over righteousness? Before Izuku could answer, Stain was moving again, not toward Todoroki this time, but toward the paralyzed Ida. The hero killer's blade gleamed as he raised it for what was clearly intended to be a killing stroke. Let him, Venom said suddenly. The engine boy chose this path. He accepted the consequences when he came here for revenge instead of justice. For a moment, just a moment, Izuku hesitated, because Venom wasn't wrong. Ida had come to Hosu for personal reasons, putting his classmates and professional heroes at risk to satisfy his own desire for vengeance. If he died here, it would be a direct result of his own selfish choices. Justice, Venom whispered. Natural consequences for poor decisions. But as Stain's blade descended toward Ida's helpless form, Izuku realized that he couldn't live with himself if he let his classmate die, regardless of the boy's motivations. He moved again, faster this time, letting venom flow through his entire body as he intercepted the killing blow. The impact sent both him and Stain sliding across the alley, locked together in a deadly embrace. Why? Venom demanded as they fought for control of Stain's blade. He chose this. He brought this on himself. Because that's what heroes do, Izuku replied, straining against the hero killer's inhuman strength. We save people, even when they make stupid decisions. Even when saving them enables future stupidity. Even when showing them mercy allows them to continue making selfish choices. The philosophical debate was interrupted by Stain breaking free from their grapple and launching into a series of attacks that tested both Izuku's reflexes and Venom's adaptive capabilities. The hero killer moved like no human Izuku had ever seen, flowing between sword strikes and knife thrusts with an economy of motion that spoke of decades of training. He is magnificent, Venom said with genuine admiration. A perfect fusion of moral conviction and deadly skill. He's a serial killer. He is a predator who culls the weak and corrupt from the herd. In nature, this serves a vital ecological function. As the fight continued, Izuku became aware that other heroes were arriving in the area. He could hear voices, see flashes of light from various quirks being used in combat. The official response to the hero killer was finally getting organized. They will interfere, Venom noted, and most of them are exactly the kind of corrupt heroes this one seeks to eliminate. Stain seemed to reach the same conclusion. With a final series of attacks that drove Izuku back, the hero killer disengaged from their fight and turned his attention to the approaching heroes. "It seems our philosophical discussion must be cut short," Stain said, and despite everything, he sounded genuinely regretful. "But I want you to remember something, young hero." The hero killer's gaze met Izuku's eyes directly, and for a moment it felt like he was looking straight into Izuku's soul. "You have something inside you that understands the necessity of hard choices," Stain said. "Something that recognizes the difference between justice and law, between righteousness and rules. Don't let them tame that part of you. The world needs heroes who are willing to do what must be done, not just what is expected." "Wise words," Venom agreed. "He sees our true nature." Before Izuku could respond, Stain was gone, moving across rooftops with inhuman agility, disappearing into the urban landscape like a shadow. The official heroes arrived moments later to find Izuku standing over his paralyzed classmates, looking like he'd been through a blender. "What happened here?" Endeavor demanded, his flames casting dancing shadows across the alley walls. "The hero killer," Izuku said simply. "We fought him, but he escaped." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough to satisfy the Flame Hero's immediate questions. As the paramedics tended to Ida and Todoroki, and the police began their investigation, Izuku found himself replaying Stain's words over and over. "He was right, you know," Venom said quietly as they were processed through the official debriefing. "About the corruption in hero society, about the necessity of hard choices, about the difference between justice and law." "He was a murderer," Izuku replied, but there was less conviction in the thought than he would have liked. "He was a predator who eliminated corrupt prey. In nature, such creatures serve a vital function." That night, lying in his temporary lodging while Ida and Todoroki recovered in the hospital, Izuku stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what had happened. The hero killer had been everything he'd been taught to oppose: violent, lawless, willing to kill to achieve his goals. But his arguments about the corruption in hero society, his observations about the difference between genuine and false heroes, those had been disturbingly logical. "He offered us wisdom," Venom said in the darkness. "The question is whether we are wise enough to accept it." "What do you mean?" He recognized what we could become, something beyond the limitations of conventional heroism. Someone willing to make the hard choices that others avoid, to do what must be done rather than what is expected. "You want me to become like him? A killer?" "We want you to become what you were meant to be. Someone who understands that sometimes, to protect the innocent, heroes must be willing to become monsters." Outside the window, Hosu City sparkled with the lights of emergency responders still cleaning up from the night's events. Somewhere out there, the hero killer was probably already planning his next move, already identifying his next target among the corrupt and selfish heroes who had forgotten what the profession was supposed to represent. And somewhere in the darkness, Izuku wondered if maybe, just maybe, Stain and Venom had a point. The interview room at the Hero Public Safety Commission headquarters was designed to be intimidating. Stark white walls, a single metal table, chairs that were deliberately uncomfortable, and a one-way mirror that everyone pretended wasn't there. Izuku had been sitting in this room for 45 minutes now, with only a glass of water and his increasingly agitated symbiotic partner for company. "This is an interrogation, not an interview," Venom observed, their mental voice tight with barely controlled aggression. "They seek to determine if we are a threat." "Of course they do," Izuku thought back. "After what happened at USJ and the sports festival, they probably think I'm some kind of walking weapons platform. Are we not?" Before Izuku could respond to that uncomfortable observation, the door opened and 3 people entered. He recognized one of them immediately, recovery girl, UA's nurse, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. The other 2 were strangers, a middle-aged woman in an expensive suit who moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority, and a younger man with the kind of pale complexion that suggested he spent most of his time indoors analyzing data. "Midori ya Izuku," the woman said, settling into the chair across from him. "I'm Yokimaru Mira from the Hero Public Safety Commission. This is Dr. Watanabe from our Quirk Analysis Division, and I believe you know Recovery Girl." The older woman reeks of political ambition, Venom noted. The younger one fears us, his stress hormones are elevated. The healing hero, she is conflicted. Am I in trouble? Izuku asked, though he already suspected he knew the answer. That depends, Mira replied, pulling out a tablet. We'd like to ask you some questions about your quirk, specifically about some inconsistencies we've noticed in your official registration. The questions started simple enough. When had his quirk first manifested? What were its primary capabilities? Had he experienced any unusual side effects or secondary mutations? Izuku answered as carefully as possible, sticking close to the truth while avoiding anything that might reveal Venom's true nature. But as the interview progressed, the questions became more pointed. Your quirk registration lists your ability as physical enhancement with adaptive properties, Dr. Watanabe said, consulting his own notes. But the footage from USJ shows capabilities that extend far beyond simple enhancement. The organic material that covers your body, the apparent sentience of your quirk's manifestations, the way it seems to act independently of your conscious will. They have been studying us, Venom realized. Analyzing our every action, every transformation. Quirks can be complex, Izuku said carefully. Sometimes the initial registration doesn't capture every aspect of an ability. Indeed, Mira agreed. Which is why we're conducting this review. You see, Midoriya, quirks with the level of complexity you've demonstrated require special oversight, particularly when they show signs of autonomous behavior. Recovery Girl shifted uncomfortably in her chair. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of professional concern mixed with genuine worry. During your treatment after the sports festival, I noticed some unusual physiological markers, she said. Your cellular regeneration rate was far beyond normal human parameters, even for someone with an enhancement quirk. And there were traces of foreign proteins in your bloodstream. They know, Venom said, and for the first time since Izuku had known the symbiote, there was genuine concern in their mental voice. Not everything, but enough to be dangerous. Foreign proteins, Izuku tried to sound confused rather than terrified. Proteins with a molecular structure unlike anything in our current biological databases, Dr. Watanabe explained. Almost as if your quirk is introducing entirely new genetic material into your system. The room went very quiet after that. Izuku could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, and he was suddenly very aware of the one-way mirror and whoever might be watching from behind it. We should leave, Venom suggested, now before they can restrain us. That's impossible, Izuku said instead. Quirks don't work that way, they're genetic mutations, not alien implants or whatever you're suggesting. The three officials exchanged glances that suggested they'd been expecting exactly that response. We're not suggesting anything, Mira said smoothly. We're simply trying to understand the full scope of your abilities, for your safety as much as anyone else's. Lies. They seek to control us, to weaponize us, or to eliminate us if we prove too dangerous. There is one more thing, Recovery Girl said reluctantly. During your recovery when you were unconscious, your quirk manifested without your conscious control. The foreign material, it seemed to be watching me. As if it was aware, she noticed. Of course she noticed. She has more experience with biological quirks than almost anyone. Izuku forced himself to remain calm, even as panic raced through his thoughts. I don't remember any of that. Sometimes quirks act reflexively when their users are injured, right? Like an immune response. Perhaps, Dr. Watanabe said, but his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. We'd like to run some additional tests. Nothing invasive, just some blood work and brain scans to better understand your quirk's neurological integration. Absolutely not, Venom said firmly. They will discover our true nature, and then we become laboratory specimens. I'd prefer not to, Izuku said. I mean, if there's no immediate danger. There might be, Mira interrupted. Quirks with autonomous properties have been known to evolve beyond their users' control, sometimes in dangerous ways. We've seen cases where the quirk essentially takes over, turning the original user into little more than a puppet. Ironic, considering they seek to turn us into puppets of the state. The interview continued for another hour, with the officials probing for information while Izuku deflected as best he could. By the time they finally let him leave, he felt mentally exhausted and deeply unsettled. They will not stop here, Venom warned as they walked out of the building. This was just the beginning. They will monitor us, investigate us, and eventually they will move to contain us. Maybe we should tell them the truth, Izuku said. Explain what you really are, where you came from, if they understood that you're not trying to take over my mind. You still do not understand what we are, Venom said quietly, or what we represent. That evening, alone in his room, Izuku found himself having the longest conversation with Venom that they'd ever attempted. For the first time since their bonding, the symbiote seemed willing to discuss their origins in detail. "We are not from your world," Venom began. "Our kind, symbiotes, come from a planet far from here, where we evolved as parasitic organisms designed to bond with other species." Parasitic, the word made Izuku uncomfortable. "Initially, yes. We required hosts to survive, and we took what we needed without regard for their well-being. But evolution is not static. Over millions of years, some of us learned that cooperation produced better results than domination." Venom's mental voice took on what might have been nostalgia. "We became partners rather than parasites, working with our hosts to achieve mutual goals. Enhanced abilities in exchange for sustenance and companionship." "So what are you doing on Earth?" "Exile," Venom admitted. "We were different from our kind. Too willing to cooperate, too reluctant to consume our hosts. The others saw us as weak, defective. We were cast out, sent away to find new hosts among the stars. We drifted through space for centuries before your planet's gravity caught us. The impact site was where your research facility later built their laboratory. They found you in the meteor debris," Izuku realized. "That's why you were in containment. For months, we lay dormant in their specimen containers, slowly awakening as we sensed the potential hosts around us. Most of the humans we encountered were unsuitable, too weak, too selfish, too consumed with trivial concerns. But you were different. Hungry for power, yes, but for the right reasons. Desperate to help others to become something greater than what you were. We felt your pain, your isolation, your desperate need to matter. Is that why you bonded with me? Because I was lonely? We bonded with you because you were like us, cast out, considered defective, but still possessing great potential. We recognized a kindred spirit." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at Izuku's door. His mother's voice called through the wood, sounding worried. "Izuku, there are some people here to see you." Izuku's blood went cold. More investigators, but when he opened the door, he found All Might standing in their hallway, still in his civilian form, but looking more serious than Izuku had ever seen him. "We need to talk," All Might said simply. They ended up on the apartment building's roof, looking out over the city lights, while All Might explained the situation in terms that made Izuku's stomach twist with anxiety. "The Hero Commission isn't the only organization that's taken an interest in you," All Might said. "There are rumors, unconfirmed but troubling, that certain villain organizations have also been gathering information about students with unusual quirks." "All for one," Venom said immediately. "The one you told us about, the symbol of evil." "All for one?" Izuku asked. All Might's expression darkened. "Among others, your quirk, whatever it really is, it represents something new. Something that existing power structures don't understand and can't easily categorize. That makes you valuable to some people and dangerous to others." "And which are we to you?" Venom asked, though they didn't voice the question through Izuku. "The Commission wants to study you, possibly contain you if they decide you're too dangerous," All Might continued. "Certain villain groups want to recruit you or steal your abilities, and the media, well, they just want a story. So what do I do?" All Might was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city he'd spent his life protecting. "You continue training," he said finally. "You get stronger, more skilled, better at controlling your abilities. And you prove to everyone watching that you're going to be a hero, regardless of how unusual your quirk might be." Simple advice. Probably insufficient for the complexity of our situation. "There's something else," All Might said, and his voice carried a note of reluctance. "I've been doing some research into the incident at the research facility. The official reports, the classified documents, the witness statements. And there's no record of any chemical spill, no documentation of biological specimens. The entire incident has been classified at levels that even I can't access." All Might turned to look at Izuku directly. "Whatever happened to you that day, it wasn't what the official story claims," he suspects, Venom observed. "Perhaps it is time for honesty." For a moment, Izuku considered telling All Might everything. About Venom's true nature, about their symbiotic relationship, about the philosophical questions that the hero killer had raised and that the symbiote continued to pursue. But before he could make that decision, his phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "Villain attack in progress. Multiple casualties reported. All available heroes respond immediately." All Might's expression shifted immediately from thoughtful to determined. "Duty calls, will continue this conversation later." But as they prepared to respond to the emergency, Izuku noticed something troubling. The attack location was less than a mile from UA, the timing was suspiciously convenient, and the alert itself seemed designed to draw maximum hero response. A trap, Venom realized. Someone wants to observe us in combat, to study our abilities under stress. All Might, Izuku said as the symbol of peace prepared to transform. I think this might be connected to the investigation. Someone might be using this emergency to gather data on my quirk. All Might paused, his expression grim. Then we'll have to be very careful about what we show them, won't we? As they headed toward the emergency, Izuku realized that his life was becoming increasingly complicated. The Hero Commission suspected he was hiding something dangerous. Villain organizations were apparently interested in his abilities, and somewhere in the shadows, forces were moving that he didn't fully understand. The comfortable illusion of being a normal student hero is ending, Venom observed. Soon, we will have to choose what we truly are and what we are willing to become. Looking back, Izuku would later recognize this as the moment when his secret life began to unravel. Not through any single revelation or catastrophic mistake, but through the steady accumulation of suspicious circumstances and unanswered questions. The investigation into his quirk was just the beginning. Soon, much more dangerous forces would turn their attention to the boy who carried an alien symbiote and the power of previous generations. And when that happened, all the careful balance he'd maintained between heroic ideals and pragmatic necessities would be tested in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The attack came at the worst possible moment. Izuku was walking back to the dorms after an exhausting day of remedial hero training when the first explosion rocked the UA campus. The blast came from the direction of the main building, followed immediately by the wailing of emergency sirens and the distinctive sound of Present Mike's voice amplified across the entire facility. All students report to designated safe zones immediately. This is not a drill. Multiple threats, Venom said immediately, their mental voice sharp with combat readiness. At least 40 individuals with hostile intent. And something else, something that feels familiar. Familiar how? Izuku asked, already running toward the source of the disturbance instead of away from it. The pale one, Shigaraki, he has returned and he is not alone. As Izuku rounded the corner near the main building, the scope of the attack became clear. The League of Villains had somehow breached UA's defenses, but they weren't alone. Black-clad figures that looked like government agents were also present, apparently fighting both the villains and any heroes who got in their way. And in the center of it all, directing both groups with casual authority, stood a figure that made Izuku's blood freeze. All for one, the symbol of evil looked exactly like All Might had described him, a man whose face was hidden by machinery, whose presence seemed to drain the light from the surrounding area. When he spoke, his voice carried across the battlefield with unnatural clarity. Midoriya Izuku, All for One called out, somehow knowing exactly where Izuku was despite the chaos surrounding them. The boy with the interesting quirk, I've been looking forward to meeting you. The ultimate predator, Venom said, and for the first time since their bonding, Izuku could feel genuine fear from his symbiotic partner. He takes quirks, consumes them, makes them his own. We could be separated. That's not going to happen, Izuku said firmly, but his voice shook slightly. Around the battlefield, Izuku could see his classmates and teachers fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Aizawa was trying to coordinate an evacuation, while his capture weapon lashed out at government agents, who seemed more interested in containing students than protecting them. Bakugo was locked in combat with multiple villains, his explosions lighting up the evening sky. Todoroki was creating ice barriers to protect fleeing students while fighting what looked like a government task force member with some kind of nullification quirk. They came for us, Venom realized. All of this, the villains, the government agents, the timing, it is all designed to force us into the open. Then let's not disappoint them, Izuku said, and let the transformation begin. But this time, he didn't hold back. Not the symbiote's full capabilities, not One for All's overwhelming power, not the combination that he'd been so careful to keep hidden. The situation was too desperate, the stakes too high for half measures. The transformation was spectacular. Black tendrils erupted from Izuku's entire body, but now they crackled with green lightning as One for All merged with Venom's alien biology. His appearance shifted into something that was neither fully human nor fully symbiote, a perfect fusion of both power sources that radiated danger like heat from a forge. Yes, Venom said with fierce satisfaction. This is what we were meant to become. The effect on the battlefield was immediate. Villains stopped their attacks to stare. Government agents reached for weapons. Even All for One paused in whatever he'd been doing to focus entirely on Izuku's transformed state. "Magnificent," the symbol of evil said, and there was genuine appreciation in his voice. "I can see why everyone is so interested in you. That level of integration between multiple power sources. It's unprecedented. He wants us," Venom warned. "He sees what we could become and desires it for himself." All for One began walking toward them, and with each step, the air itself seemed to grow heavier. Other fights paused as combatants on all sides recognized that something significant was about to happen. "I'm going to offer you a choice, young man," All for One said, his voice carrying easily across the distance between them. "Join me willingly, and I'll allow your friends to live. Resist, and I'll take your quirk by force and leave this entire school as a monument to your poor decision-making." Before Izuku could respond, someone else entered the battlefield. All Might landed between Izuku and All for One with enough force to crack the concrete beneath his feet. But this wasn't the diminished, time-limited version of the symbol of peace that Izuku had grown accustomed to. This was All Might at full power, radiating the kind of presence that had once made villains flee entire cities rather than face him. "You want the boy's quirk," All Might said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the air vibrate. "You'll have to go through me first." The two ultimate powers of this generation, Venom observed with something like awe. This is what legends are made of. The battle that followed was unlike anything Izuku had ever witnessed. All Might and All for One moved with speed that made them blur, their impacts shaking the entire campus. But even as the two titans fought, Izuku became aware that the battle wasn't really about them. It was about him. The government agents were trying to establish a containment perimeter around the area where he stood. The League of Villains was attempting to isolate him from potential allies. Even some of the pro-heroes seemed more focused on observing his capabilities than actually helping with the crisis. "They all want something from us," Venom said as Izuku fought off a group of villains who had broken through the chaos. "The government wants to control us, the villains want to recruit us, even the heroes want to study us." "What do you want?" Izuku asked as he webbed two attackers to a wall. "We want to survive, we want to grow stronger. We want to find our place in this world." That's when Izuku noticed his classmates. Despite the evacuation orders, despite the obvious danger, Class 1A was fighting their way toward him. Not to capture him or study him or make demands of him, but to help. Bakugo was blasting through government agents with single-minded fury. Todoroki was freezing villain reinforcements while creating an ice bridge to reach Izuku's position. Ida was using his engines to evacuate injured civilians while coordinating with Uraraka to provide air support. "They choose to stand with us," Venom realized, and there was something like wonder in the mental voice. "Despite knowing what we are, despite seeing our true nature, they choose loyalty over fear. Because that's what heroes do," Izuku said, and for the first time since the battle began, he smiled. The tide of the battle shifted when Class 1A reached Izuku's position. Working together, they created a defensive formation that allowed them to hold their ground against both villains and government agents, while the larger battle between All Might and All for One raged around them. "Whatever your quirk really is," Todoroki said as he froze a group of attacking agents, "it doesn't matter. You're our classmate and we're not letting anyone take you." "Acceptance," Venom said quietly. "They accept us for what we are, not what they want us to be." "Your friends are admirable," All for One called out during a brief pause in his battle with All Might, "but ultimately irrelevant. I will have your quirk, boy, one way or another." That's when the symbol of evil made his mistake. Instead of continuing to focus on All Might, he turned his attention directly to Izuku's classmates. A wave of dark energy erupted from his position, aimed not at the pro-heroes or even at Izuku himself, but at the students who had chosen to stand with him. "He threatens our pack," Venom snarled, and suddenly the symbiote's alien nature became fully apparent. This cannot be allowed. The power that erupted from Izuku in that moment was beyond anything he had ever achieved before. One for All and the symbiote didn't just work together. They became something entirely new, something that transcended the limitations of either power source individually. Black tendrils wreathed in green lightning stretched across the battlefield, creating a protective barrier around his classmates while simultaneously striking out at every threat in the area. Villains found themselves webbed to buildings with bonds that crackled with energy. Government agents discovered that their nullification technology was useless against a power source that constantly adapted and evolved. And All for One found himself face to face with something he had never encountered before. "We are not just a quirk to be stolen," Venom said through Izuku's mouth, their combined voice carrying harmonics that made everyone on the battlefield stop and listen. "We are a partnership, a symbiosis. You cannot take what we are because what we are cannot exist without both parts." "Fascinating," All for One replied, but for the first time there was uncertainty in his voice. "A quirk that exists in the spaces between host and parasite. I admit, I'm not sure how to steal something like that." "Then perhaps you should not try," Venom suggested, and the threat in their voice was unmistakable. The final confrontation was brief but decisive. All Might, given an opening by Izuku's protective barrier, landed a blow that sent All for One flying across the campus. The symbol of evil retreated, but not before making it clear that this was far from over. "This is merely a tactical withdrawal," he called out as he disappeared into a portal created by the warp villain. "I will study your unique nature, boy, and when I return, I will find a way to make your power my own." The government agents withdrew as well, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor when faced with a group of teenage heroes who had just held their own against some of the most dangerous villains in the country. As the dust settled and the emergency responders arrived, Izuku found himself surrounded by his classmates, his teachers, and a growing crowd of reporters who had somehow breached the campus security perimeter. "The secret is out," Venom observed as camera crews focused on Izuku's still transformed state. "There will be no more hiding what we are." "Good," Izuku said, and meant it. "I'm tired of hiding." The press conference that followed was surreal. Nezu, UA's principal, fielded most of the questions while Izuku sat beside him in his normal human form, but the media's focus was entirely on the unprecedented quirk integration they had just witnessed. "Is it true that your quirk has some form of sentience?" one reporter asked. Izuku looked at Nezu, who nodded slightly. "Yes," Izuku said simply, "my quirk, my partner, is aware and intelligent. We work together to achieve common goals." "Partner," Venom repeated, and there was deep satisfaction in the mental voice. "Yes, that describes us perfectly." "Are you concerned about the potential danger of such a powerful ability in the hands of a student?" another reporter pressed. This time it was All Might who answered, stepping up to the podium with his trademark grin. "Young Midoriya has repeatedly demonstrated that he uses his abilities to protect others, regardless of personal cost," the symbol of peace said. "Power without character is meaningless, but character combined with power, that's what creates true heroes." "He understands," Venom said. "Finally, someone who sees us for what we could become rather than what we might do wrong." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of interviews, assessments, and policy changes. The Hero Commission, faced with public support for Izuku's actions during the crisis, was forced to acknowledge that their previous approach to unusual quirks might need revision. "They fear us less now," Venom observed as they underwent yet another round of voluntary testing. "They begin to understand that we are not a threat to be contained, but an asset to be cultivated." "As long as we prove worthy of that trust," Izuku replied. "We will. We have each other, we have allies who accept us for what we are, and we have a clear understanding of our purpose, which is to become the kind of hero that both human and symbiote can be proud of, to show the world that cooperation produces better results than domination, to prove that different doesn't necessarily mean dangerous." That evening, as Izuku sat in his dorm room reviewing the day's events, he reflected on how much had changed since that first day at the research facility. He'd gone from being a quirkless nobody to being someone with two of the most powerful abilities in the world. He'd learned to balance human morality with alien pragmatism. He'd found friends who accepted him despite knowing his deepest secrets. "We have grown," Venom said quietly, "both of us. We are no longer the desperate boy and exiled symbiote who first bonded in that laboratory. We have become something new, something better." "What happens now?" Izuku asked. "Now we continue to grow. We learn to be the heroes this world needs, not just the heroes it expects. We face whatever challenges come next together." Outside his window, the lights of UA campus twinkled in the darkness, a symbol of hope and possibility in a world that was finally beginning to understand that being different didn't have to mean being dangerous. The perfect storm had passed, but in its wake, something new had been born, a partnership between human and alien that represented the future of heroism itself. 6 months after the attack on UA, Izuku stood on the roof of a burning apartment building, holding a terrified child while Venom's tendrils secured evacuation lines for the other trapped residents. "It's okay," he told the little girl as they descended toward the waiting firefighters. "You're safe now." The rescue operation was being broadcast live across Japan, not because it was particularly unusual, but because the media still found Izuku's partnership with Venom fascinating enough to warrant extensive coverage. What had started as fearful speculation about the symbiotic hero had gradually evolved into genuine public interest in how such an unprecedented quirk actually worked in practice. "The child trusts us completely," Venom observed as they handed her over to the paramedics. "No fear, no hesitation. Children are often wiser than adults about such things. They haven't learned to be afraid of what's different yet," Izuku agreed, watching as the girl waved at him from the safety of the ambulance. The apartment fire was contained within an hour, with no casualties and minimal property damage. It was the kind of routine rescue operation that professional heroes handled dozens of times each day. But for Izuku, it represented something much more significant. 6 months ago, his presence at an emergency scene would have caused panic. Government agents would have arrived to monitor his actions. Other heroes would have watched him with suspicion, wondering if his alien partner might suddenly decide to devour a few civilians. Now he was simply another hero doing his job. "The integration is complete," Venom noted with satisfaction as they made their way back to UA for afternoon classes. "They no longer see us as a curiosity or a threat. We have become normal. Is that what you wanted?" Izuku asked. "To be normal, we wanted to belong, to find our place in this world. Normal is simply the word humans use when they stop being afraid of something." The changes hadn't happened overnight. After the attack on UA and the subsequent media attention, Izuku had spent months in interviews, assessments, and public appearances designed to help society understand what he and Venom actually represented. The Hero Commission had initially wanted to classify them as a potential WMD, but public opinion and All Might's advocacy had pushed for a different approach. "Midoriya represents the future of heroism," All Might had said during one particularly heated commission meeting that had somehow been leaked to the press. "Not because his power is unusual, but because his character is exceptional. We should be nurturing heroes like him, not trying to contain them." The press conference where Izuku had first spoken openly about his partnership with Venom had been a turning point. Instead of trying to minimize or hide the symbiote's alien nature, he'd been completely honest about their relationship. The arguments, the compromises, the gradual development of mutual trust and respect. "Venom isn't just my quirk," he'd told the assembled reporters. "They're my partner. We don't always agree on how to handle situations, but we've learned to work together toward common goals. That's what partnerships are, learning to balance different perspectives to achieve something neither could accomplish alone." "You spoke well that day," Venom remembered, "though you failed to mention how dramatically your combat effectiveness increased after our bonding." "Because that's not the most important part," Izuku replied mentally as he swung between buildings using the symbiote's webbing. "The most important part is that we learned to trust each other." The return to UA's campus was accompanied by the usual mix of stares and casual greetings that had become normal over the past few months. Some students were still obviously fascinated by his unique situation. But most of Class 1A had long since gotten used to the fact that their classmate occasionally held conversations with an alien entity that lived in his body. "Midoriya," Uraraka waved from across the courtyard. "How was the rescue operation?" "Routine," Izuku replied, settling down beside his friends for lunch. "Nobody hurt, building saved, everyone happy." "The news said you pulled 12 people out of that fire," Ida noted, adjusting his glasses. "That's hardly routine efficiency." "The engine boy has developed a grudging respect for our capabilities," Venom observed, "though he still disapproves of some of our methods." That was true. Ida had never fully forgiven Izuku for the philosophical conversation he'd witnessed between Izuku and the hero killer months earlier. The class president understood intellectually that sometimes heroes had to make difficult choices, but he preferred those choices to be clearly delineated by law and regulation. 12 people in 40 minutes, Todoroki said quietly. "Most rescue heroes would need a full team to achieve those numbers." "I have help," Izuku replied simply, and several of his classmates smiled at the now familiar reminder of his unique partnership. The afternoon was spent in advanced hero theory with All Might, discussing the psychological and social aspects of professional heroism. It was the kind of class that Izuku had always found fascinating, but today he was particularly interested in the topic. Public perception and hero effectiveness. "Who can tell me why public trust matters for heroes?" All Might asked the class. Several hands went up, but he pointed to Izuku. "Midoriya, you've had some unique experiences with public perception recently. What are your thoughts?" Izuku considered the question carefully. Heroes can't function effectively without public cooperation, he said. If people don't trust us, they won't call for help when they need it. They won't provide information that could prevent crimes. They might even actively work against us if they think we're dangerous. Wisdom learned through experience, Venom noted approvingly. Remember how they used to flee from us. But trust has to be earned, Izuku continued. Especially when you're different from what people expect heroes to be, you have to prove over and over that you're worthy of that trust. And how do you prove that? All Might asked. By being consistent, by always putting others' safety first, by being honest about what you are and what you can do, even when that honesty makes people uncomfortable. And by never giving them reason to doubt that their well-being is more important to us than our own desires, Venom added mentally. After class, All Might asked Izuku to stay behind for a few minutes. These private conversations had become regular occurrences over the past few months, as the symbol of peace continued to help Izuku navigate the unique challenges of his situation. You've grown a lot this year, All Might said once they were alone. Not just in power, but in wisdom. The way you handled that reporter's question about whether Venom might someday outgrow you was particularly impressive. Izuku remembered that interview. The reporter had been trying to stir up fear about the possibility that the symbiote might eventually decide it didn't need its human partner anymore. Venom and I are stronger together than either of us could be separately, he'd replied. That's what symbiosis means, mutual benefit. Neither of us has any interest in ending a partnership that works so well. Truth, Venom had confirmed privately. We are incomplete without each other now. There's something I wanted to discuss with you, All Might continued. The Hero Commission has been talking about creating a new classification for heroes with unusual circumstances. Heroes whose quirks involve partnerships with sentient entities or who operate outside traditional power categories. They're calling it the Symbiotic Hero Classification. Izuku blinked in surprise. A whole new classification? You wouldn't be the only one, it turns out. There are other heroes, other students who have similar situations. Tokoyami, for instance, his dark shadow is far more autonomous than most people realize. There are others as well, scattered around the world. The Commission thinks it might be useful to have specialized training programs, support networks, even research initiatives focused on understanding these kinds of partnerships. Recognition, Venom said with deep satisfaction. Not just tolerance, but acknowledgement that we represent something valuable. What do you think? All Might asked. I think it could help a lot of people, Izuku said slowly. Not just people like me, but anyone who's different in ways that make them feel isolated or dangerous. If we can show that being unusual doesn't have to mean being a threat. Exactly. All Might's smile was warm and proud. You've become a symbol, young Midoriya, not just of power, but of the possibility that differences can be strengths rather than weaknesses. That evening, Izuku sat in his dorm room working on an essay for his hero ethics class. The topic was the evolution of heroic ideals in modern society, and he found himself thinking about how much his own understanding of heroism had changed over the past year. You were so certain about everything when we first bonded, Venom observed. Heroes were good, villains were evil, the line between them was clear and absolute. I was naive, Izuku admitted. I thought heroism was just about having good intentions and strong powers. And now I think heroism is about making the right choice even when all your options are difficult. It's about accepting responsibility for the consequences of your actions. It's about understanding that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use your power. The hero killer would approve of your evolved philosophy. That was still a sensitive topic. Stain remained in prison, but his words about corruption in hero society had proven disturbingly prophetic. Several prominent heroes had been exposed for various forms of professional misconduct over the past year, and the Hero Commission had been forced to implement new oversight measures. Do you ever think he was right? Izuku asked. About the problems with hero society, he was right about the problems. He was wrong about the solutions. Change through fear and violence only creates more problems. Change through example, through proving that better approaches are possible. That creates lasting improvement. You have become proof that different approaches can work. There was a knock at Izuku's door, followed by several familiar voices calling his name. When he opened it, he found most of Class 1A standing in the hallway, looking excited about something. Movie night, Uraraka announced. Kaminari got the new All Might documentary, and we're doing a class viewing in the common room. Come on, Midoriya, Kirishima added. It's not the same without everyone there. They include us without question now, Venom noted as Izuku joined his classmates. Not as the interesting oddity or the potentially dangerous unknown, but simply as one of them. The documentary was fascinating, covering All Might's career from his early days as a sidekick through his rise to become the symbol of peace. But what struck Izuku most was how the film portrayed the evolution of All Might's approach to heroism, from the raw power and simple moral certainty of his youth to the nuanced understanding and strategic thinking of his later career. He learned as you have learned, Venom observed. That true strength comes not from the absence of doubt, but from the ability to act righteously despite uncertainty. During the film's intermission, while his classmates debated various aspects of All Might's career, Izuku found himself thinking about the future. Graduation was still more than a year away, but already he was beginning to consider what kind of professional hero he wanted to become. "What's your plan?" Todoroki asked, apparently noticing his thoughtful expression. "After graduation, I mean, what kind of hero agency do you want to join?" "I'm not sure I want to join an existing agency," Izuku said slowly. I think I might want to start something new. An agency that specializes in situations that traditional heroes might not be equipped to handle. Cases involving unusual quirks, complex moral situations, or threats that require unconventional approaches, Venom added mentally. "That sounds like you," Uraraka said with a smile. "Always wanting to help people that others might overlook." "They understand us," Venom observed. "Our nature, our goals, our desire to prove that being different can be a strength rather than a weakness." The evening concluded with the entire class sprawled across the common room furniture, discussing their plans and dreams for the future. It was the kind of casual, comfortable interaction that Izuku had never experienced before coming to UA, the simple pleasure of belonging to a group that accepted him completely. "This is what we fought for," Venom said quietly as the gathering wound down. "Not just the power to protect others, but the right to be part of something larger than ourselves." "Are you happy?" Izuku asked as he prepared for bed later that night. "With how things turned out?" "Happy is a human emotion," Venom replied, "but satisfied, yes. We have found what we were searching for: purpose, companionship, acceptance. We have proven that cooperation produces better results than domination. We have become something that neither human nor symbiote could achieve alone. And you? Are you content with what we have become?" Izuku considered the question as he looked out his window at the UA campus, peaceful in the moonlight. A year ago, he had been a quirkless nobody whose greatest dream seemed impossible. Now he was a hero in training with unprecedented abilities, genuine friendships, and the respect of society. But more than that, he had learned that strength came not from the power he wielded, but from the choices he made about how to use that power. "I'm content," he said finally. "We've built something good together, something that helps people and makes the world a little bit better. Then we have succeeded, not just in becoming heroes, but in proving that symbiosis, true partnership, is possible between very different kinds of consciousness. The future will bring new challenges, new threats, new opportunities to prove our worth. But whatever comes, we will face it together." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing lives that he and Venom had sworn to protect. Tomorrow would bring new rescues, new training, new steps toward becoming the heroes they were meant to be. But tonight, for the first time since their bonding, both human and symbiote were at peace with what they had become and excited about what they might yet achieve. The boy who had once been quirkless and the alien who had once been exiled had found their place in the world, not as separate entities struggling for control, but as true partners working toward a common goal. They were Midoriya, Izuku, and Venom, the symbiotic hero, and their story was just beginning. The graduation ceremony at UA was traditionally held in the spring, when cherry blossoms painted the campus in shades of pink and white. This year was no different, except for the unprecedented media attention focused on one particular graduate. "Midoriya Izuku," Principal Nezu announced from the podium, graduating valedictorian of the Hero course, recipient of the All Might Award for Heroic Excellence, and the first officially classified symbiotic hero in recorded history. The applause was thunderous as Izuku walked across the stage to receive his diploma. In the audience, his mother cried tears of pride while All Might beamed like a proud father. His classmates, now his fellow graduates, cheered enthusiastically from their seats. "We did it," Venom said with deep satisfaction. "We proved that being different doesn't mean being dangerous." After the ceremony, as graduates mingled with family and friends, Izuku found himself surrounded by reporters asking about his plans for the future. "I'm opening my own agency," he announced, surprising everyone including some of his closest friends. The Symbiotic Hero Agency will specialize in cases involving unusual quirks, complex moral situations, and threats that require unconventional approaches. And your partner? One reporter asked. Venom, how do they feel about this decision? Izuku smiled, placing one hand over his heart where he could feel the symbiote's presence like a warm pulse of approval. We're excited, he said simply. There are a lot of people out there who need heroes willing to understand that different doesn't have to mean dangerous. We're looking forward to proving that cooperation, true symbiosis, can accomplish things that neither human nor alien could achieve alone. The future begins now, Venom said as they walked away from the ceremony, diploma in hand, and the world spread out before them full of infinite possibilities. Together, from Quirkless Zero to Symbiotic Hero, what a journey, right? Deku basically had to learn that true strength isn't about having the biggest power, it's about making the right choices when all your options suck. And Venom. They went from let's eat bad guys to okay fine, we'll web them up instead. Which moment hit you the hardest? That USJ transformation, the sports festival forfeit? Or when Class 1A literally fought the government to protect their weird classmate? Drop your thoughts below, subscribe if this was your thing, and seriously, what other impossible crossovers should we tackle next? Catch you in the next one.